will get easier, while yours gets harder. Right now, it is like an open wound, but eventually it will heal and turn into a scar. I will not forget, I will remember, but it will not hurt as much, and I will be stronger. I am no longer going to be bound by the things you did to me or the way you betrayed my trust. I am letting go of the hold you had in my mind. I am releasing you to God and His judgment. You are in His hands now. May you ponder that each and every day you wake up behind bars. May you understand each day the imprisonment you subjected me and hundreds of other innocent girls to with your horrendous abuse. Today, I can finally say that I am free from the hold you had over me. Today, I am seizing my power and control you took from me. I am free from the chains of abuse that bound me. May God have mercy on your soul.
Yes. Yes.
I do want to say that yesterday afternoon, I received a Facebook message that stated to me, "Hell will be a very hot place for your lies about Larry Nassar. Shame on you. You're probably getting even because he wouldn't let you have your way with something." How ignorant, people. Just want to say that. If you have nothing nice to say, don't say it. Also, I asked Luanna Simon to be here for my statement. She told me she could not fit it in her schedule. And then I saw today there was a statement by MSU that said, MSU has been perceived to be tone deaf. Well, you are. I told you back in 1997. You knew back then, and every time you say you didn't know, you are re-shaming, re-victimizing, and calling me a liar. The other day, when I asked Simon for the favor, she said, "I'll just watch it on the live feed." How is that not tone deaf? How is that not doing anything to help the victims? That's not doing anything. They say they're doing things to help the victims. I'm sorry, MSU, if you're listening. That right there shows that you're tone deaf. I pray that this creates a change and a wave, transparency, so that this never, ever has to happen again. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for your words. I'm not tone deaf. I've heard every word. The world has heard every word. And your words are very clear and very brave, and your thinking has never been confused. So at some point, I don't know if you've done this already or not, and no, I'm not a therapist, but I do know that you need to forgive that 16-year-old, that girl who didn't know because you trusted the wrong people, and that happens all the time to children. So your message is being delivered. We need to teach our children to question and re-question, and we need adults to speak loudly on behalf of children. You have killed the beast that you were afraid of with your strength and with your words, and you and the other survivors have exposed the beast.
Yes.
Defendant, through his own actions, not any judge's bias, not for fun, not because we like to waste our time, but 3 judges will ensure, based on the law, based on all of your comments, which you have all a right to, the record that you've made is incredible, collectively and individually. And the defendant will, because of judges and the law, be trapped in a small cell with bars. He's defeated. You are never defeated. You just didn't know better. You do now. And other children now know better too because of your words.
Yes.
Passing on that message is absolutely critical. I will pass it on like a federal judge did, like Judge Cunningham will do. We will pass the message on in our sentencing. But I know that your voice and the voice of your lovely family will never stop talking, and that's critical, and I so am honored that all of you have been here to speak. And thank you for your words and the time that you spent agonizing over your words. It was time well spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we will resume Monday at 9 o'clock. And for the media, if anybody wants to leave your equipment, we have a waiver and release, so it'll be right in place on Monday. Otherwise, get here early and we'll set it up again. For all of you, we plan to work Monday 9 to 5. I don't know if we'll finish. We do have additional names. So I don't know if sentencing is going to be Monday or Tuesday, but I've cleared out my calendar. So Monday and Tuesday, I'm ready for whoever wants to proceed to speak, and we will get to sentencing. We're getting closer. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. That's all for the record. All right.
Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network, everybody. This is Jesse Weber. What an explosive day of these survivor impact statements. You heard all of them. You heard a lot of them today. And we expect that there might be 30 more beginning next week. A total of 90 women and survivors have come forward. And it's not just the women who were affected, but also the family members. I want to bring in right now via Skype criminal defense attorney Adam Sostra. And Adam, I know we don't have that much time, but I'm glad to have you on. I would like your perspective on this as the sentencing hearing moves forward into next week. What have you seen and what can we expect?
To hear from, we're going to be seeing the same thing we saw this week. Obviously, it's pretty interesting. I've actually never seen a case where the people that are testifying aren't the immediate victim who's charged in the complaint or the indictment or the information, but it's people that they were never named victims in the complaint by the district attorney's office. You have numerous victims that aren't part of that. Here we're only I think we're only playing with 10 victims, and then the rest, they're not part of that, but the defendant agreed to have these victim impact statements read per his sentencing, and the court's going to make a decision, and the judge is going to use whatever information she deems relevant. And it's just pretty interesting because these people aren't part of what's charged.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. We are the Law and Crime Network, but we're watching multiple statements made that technically were not decided in a court of law. They were not a part of the 10 counts that he pled guilty to. Now, just between you, me, and all our viewers, they're true. But the point is from a court perspective, you take everything, he hasn't been tried in a court based upon the 140 accusations, right. and Judge Aquilina says, she keeps making the point that for a judicial economy, we're going to try 160 cases, but it makes more sense that he has pled guilty in that plea agreement, and he has agreed to hear these survivor impact statements. But we are talking about the sentencing here, and Judge Aquilina said yesterday, I still haven't made up my mind. I still want to hear the rest of the statements. How much do you buy that, or how much do you believe, you know what, this is just punishment for him? Punishment to hear every one of his victims, and it's not so much I haven't made up my mind, but they need this as a catharsis, and it's the right thing to do.
Exactly, and I think that's how she's looking at it. It's cathartic for them. It's important for each of their stories to be told. It wouldn't make sense, obviously, to have 300 prosecutions against one individual. It's just something you can't do for the sake of judicial economy. You want the victims to get justice. You don't want them to wait 1,000 years for the person to get their final sentence. So I get it. This is more for the victims, although I believe she made a statement the other day that he's going to be spending his life in prison. So She's already made a decision. This is going to be an indeterminate sentence. It's not going to be determinate, meaning 30 or 40 years. It's going to be to life. That's what he's going to be receiving in this case. She's already made up her mind, but this is the opportunity for these people that have been living with these horrible things that happen to them for so much of their lives. and they get a chance to speak out, and they prepared their statements, and in a way, it's kind of nice that the court's allowing this. How many judges are going to allow victims from the far reaches of the earth or the county or wherever? So they all get to make a statement.
Right.
They all get to have their stay. He's already admitted guilt in this matter. That's over with. The only issue is sentencing.
Yeah, it's important that their voices be heard, and I think that's the really big aspect here. And again, from a practical point of view, yes, he will spend the rest of his life in prison because he was already sentenced and convicted to 60 years in prison. He's 54 years old, so he's already been sentenced for 60 years for child pornography charges. Adam, my final question to you, because I know we have to let you go. This is not the only guilty party. You keep hearing it throughout the whole course of this week. MSU, the United States Gymnastics, the United States Olympic Committee, John Geddard, Kathy Claglis, all these people that seem to have covered it up, that knew about it. And we saw this statement, we talked about it on the network, we saw it, this young lady just was talking about it, that there was a statement that from MSU that, we hear that we've been called tone deaf. Well, you have been called tone deaf because you are tone deaf. MSU, how are they all culpable moving forward? What can we expect with their lawsuits, criminal liability? What do you think? Adam, I think we might have lost our connection with Adam.
Criminal liability.
Adam, we still have you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, they obviously face civil liability. It's clear negligence. There's a duty of care. You believe that there could be some kind of harm. It's foreseeable. The issue being, what notice they had. It would appear that over time that there had been abundant notice. When I was reading through the facts of this case, it just made me think of, here we have Michigan State. It made me think of Penn State. Penn State with Sandusky, Penn State with the dean, and then what he even knew was very limited, yet he still was prosecuted in this case. So I think that's going to be a part of it. I understand people are disappointed in the attorney general who's running for governor. There was some sort of investigation, but we don't have any notes pertaining to that investigation or what kind of findings were made. This is something that the public is not going to allow. They're not going to let it just stop at the prosecution of this former doctor. I don't know if he's still licensed or not. I'm assuming he's lost that or was about to. This is going to go on. This is going to go to the Olympics. It's going to go to the officials at Michigan State. It's not going to end. It's just like Penn State.
And you know what, Adam? The ripple effects will continue. This is just the beginning. And with the Olympics beginning soon, this is going to cast quite the shadow moving forward. Adam Sostrin, thank you so much for joining us here. We can't wait to have you back to talk about this case and the other cases that we cover here on the Law&Crime Network.
Thanks, Jesse. Good to be here.
All right, everybody. Really emotional week. We really covered a lot of it. And we covered 90 survivors speaking, not just the victims, their family members, but it was a whole series of accusations and brought against Larry Nassar, as well as MSU, United States Gymnastics, the Olympic Committee. They will all have to face the heat moving forward, and this is just the beginning. We will continue our coverage of the Larry Nassar, sentencing hearing beginning Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. Don't worry, we'll cover it here live on the Law&Crime Network. We also want to let you know that there are 2 other trials we are covering here as well. You can go to lawandcrime.com to follow the William Woodward case out of Titusville, Florida, that double homicide case, as well as attempted murder of a man who is claiming self-defense and that it was justifiable homicide. He faces the potential of the death penalty. That will begin again starting on Monday as well. And then also, we can't let you forget that on Monday, jury deliberations continue in the Jason Riley King case out of California. That is that former San Diego Marine who was accused of driving drunk on the wrong side of the road, causing a head-on collision that killed 2 young UCSD medical students and injuring 3 others. He faces 2 counts of second-degree murder, as well as a litany of other charges. The jury is deliberating about whether or not this is murder or whether or not this is manslaughter. That will continue Monday as well. We believe that will begin at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. You're not going to want to miss that one. But again, our focus will be the Larry Nassar case beginning Monday. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back next week. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Welcome to Totally BS with, that's right, Bill Stanton. And with me today I have two fantastic guests. I have Jessica Ramirez, well-known lawyer out of New Jersey. You ever need to be defended, you go to Jessica. And I have Dr. Darren Porcher. He's not a medical doctor. He won't be checking my prostate anytime soon. But he's a great PhD that knows about criminal matters, a retired
I can work
cop.
on your shoulder if you need me to.
No, I won't have that either. And the guy that makes me look smart and sound smart, Alberto. Alberto, weigh in, please.
What's up?
Can you give us our first story for today?
So we've got a new allegation against the comedian Aziz Ansari. A woman, a 23-year-old photographer, she says they went on a date last September. He took her back to his Tribeca apartment. And, you know, they started out, exchanged oral sex, but she says he kept pushing for more, even though she didn't want to. And she says she sent verbal and non-verbal cues to tell him that this was inappropriate. The allegation started a very, it's an online debate about what consent is, and yeah.
Okay, I got it. So did everybody here read this story? Is everybody familiar with the story?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to give you my opinion first, and then I want you folks to weigh in, and I'm going to try and temper what I think is insanity, where we're going with this, movement. So let me be forthright and say, Harvey Weinstein, in my opinion, based on everything that was said, is pathological. What he did, borders on real psychotic shit, meaning here's a guy who I think it was self-loathing why he did what he did, right? And then you have other, movie stars and actors that we see. They're doing it, in my opinion, my professional and personal opinion, based on a little bit of ego, a whole bunch of money, and not enough time. So it's, in their mindset, easy pickings, if you will. So now we have everyone that wants to be part of the movement weighing in. So here we have this comedian. And there's what I read, and then there's what I read in between the lines. And maybe I'm speaking from a biased point of view, but it's my point of view. And I'm open for my mind to be changed. Let me preface that. So here you have this guy. He asks a good-looking girl on a date. Now, it's clear he had one intention, and one intention only, and that's, to hook up, right? So he gets back to the apartment, and the way I read it, well, he started giving me, let me say it this way. He started going south of the belt buckle, and I was okay with that. And then he asked, hey, how about going south of the border on me? Not Taco Bell, but, something more sexual oriented. And then the next day, because she has misgivings or second feelings, she's retroactively going and saying how she feels funny about it and how embarrassing she goes across the world. Now, the way I look at it, women can't have, I don't look at you as a woman, I look at you as an equal. I look at you as an equal. I don't see race, creed, or color. I see intelligent human beings who I have here to be with me to converse back and forth. Not necessarily from the perspective of any certain group, but from your mindset. And then if you want to add those other labels, if you will, have at it. But now you have this guy whose whole career is on hold based on her free agency. So are you either an independent woman who's intelligent, who's capable of making her own decisions, or are you putting your life totally in my hands that I have to interpret everything? Well, you know what? You blinked twice in the last 5 seconds. So that means you going down south, really, you're doing it under duress. And I'm sure Aziz, while that was going on, the last thing he was thinking about how many times she was blanking. So that's my opinion.
I have to agree with you. I really do. And I'm a feminist. I'm a proud feminist, but this story really makes me angry, and I think it's going to be a detriment to the feminist movement. I think that what we have here is a young girl, 22-year-old girl, not a woman, that went out on a bad date and went out with a guy that wasn't very much into her and just wanted one thing, and she wasn't strong enough to say no and get out. I mean, I think she was complaining about they went out to dinner and he was very quick to get the check. That's a sign that he's really not that into you and he wants to do one thing. Right. So again, maybe, I'm not 22. I would take that to mean I got to get out of here. This guy, you know what I mean?
Wait. Let me just stay with you for a moment. So in my eyes, you're a pretty young lady. I'm a guy, I ask you out, you're going to see, like a picture, where these pictures are coming, yes or no?
Absolutely. So if you're trying to get the check right away, let's go home, that's a problem.
Right.
That's my cue right now. He's not that into me. I got to get out of here. But to say that it was sexual assault and that she's a sexual victim now, absolutely not. I don't think he did anything legally wrong, and I think that it's really waters down our movement.
Wow, I was not expecting that from
I
you.
know, I know.
I mean,
All right, Doc, you're up.
I come straight in and I look at it as the two exchange professionals. You said going south of the border. I refer to it as two professionals. It was one of these things. They both sat down. They had dinner. It's difficult to say that if he was into her or not because he rushed out of there. I mean, apparently there had to be some level of him liking this woman, so to speak. That's why he went out with her in the first place. He goes back to the house. What happens, happens. The truth of the matter is, this is a classic situation when people get together. Oftentimes, people do have these types of encounters and then move forward, with the exclusion of the one person storming out the room and saying, look, I can't believe what happened, this was terrible. But the truth of the matter is, like she mentioned, it was just a bad date. In terms of the feminist movement, you know, it's difficult to say I go either to the left or the right. But what I will say is this is a spike through the heart of this Me Too movement, because this has come to the forefront, and this is what's resonating right now with everyone.
Well, it waters it down, and I'll tell you why. Because first, by the way, just a brief aside, it is god-awful hot in here, so I'm going to get some water at some point. It is very warm in this studio, but we'll forge on through it.
You're dressed for the occasion.
I know, I'm the only one that looks cool. So, it used to be, in the beginning, a person of authority when the Me Too movement started, correct me if I'm wrong, where someone had a position of authority, say the same workplace, I'm senior, you're junior, and there shouldn't be fraternization. You know, now there's networks where they're making you become a spy, where your job is endangered if you even think two other coworkers are dating and you don't report them. This is a definite Big Brother world we're living in. Now it seems to be extending into a bad date. This is insanity. I mean, it's a culture shock, and it's gonna self-correct, but people are gonna suffer because of it. I'll give you an example, and I don't know how to circle that square. I have two friends, two young, good-looking guys in their mid-20s, and they're talking about the dating world today. And apparently, a lot of this world is on these hookup apps. So this is alien to me, the same way, you know, when I bought my grandmother a microwave, and now I sympathize with her. She didn't know how to work it, and I would make fun of her. I do not know this world, so I'll tell you that. So apparently, there's a code word with these hookup apps of Netflix and chill. So, like, let's watch Netflix and chill.
I didn't know that's what that meant.
Is code for, I'm assuming you must get that a lot.
No, but I've heard that, and I didn't know that's
Let's
what
get
that
Netflix
meant.
is code for let's hook up. So here's a guy, a professional guy who's a producer, who never met this girl before. He has roommates, lives in the city. She comes over. They go directly to his room, and within 30, 45 minutes, you know, they have some recreational, I guess, doctor-prescribed cannabis, whatever you want to call it, and then they engage in sex. Never met her. Their whole existence lasted within an hour, and he never saw her again. So how do you circle that square where a woman will come back 20, 30, 40 years later, you know, possibly rewriting history? You know, I don't know, but are we supposed to take someone's whole life, career, and existence based on someone's recollection from 30, 40 years ago? And I just don't think that's fair. I
disagree. I mean, this is a slippery slope, and you know, I see now this is inclining towards men being the victims. When I look at Aziz, for example.
So how do you disagree with me?
Why do I disagree with you?
Right.
I shouldn't say I disagree with you. I disagree. I agree that men are becoming the victims in this movement. And one of the things is now it's like for a single guy. I mean, you're like playing Russian roulette.
Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are aggressive guys, and there are creeps.
But you need to separate them accordingly. And you mentioned the Harvey Weinstein initially. I understood that's somebody that's steadfast in the penalty box.
Right.
But when we take in consideration the average guy, I look at this Aziz situation.
Right.
I see two consenting adults that went to this guy's house, and then this event took a turn for the
and went
worse.
south.
Right. But
literally and figuratively.
Right. She left, and that was the end of it. But what she did,
you got to pick up on my jokes, young man.
Yeah,
That was fun.
what she's trying to get her 5 minutes of fame from what, in essence, was a bad date.
All right, so Alberto, save me putting on these glasses. Give me the next one.
All right. So John Jones, former UFC light heavyweight champion, reportedly last month took a polygraph test about him taking an anabolic steroid. He apparently passed it when he was asked, did he knowingly take it? And he apparently didn't know that he had taken it.
All right, so John Jones, everybody knows the UFC Ultimate Fighting. John Jones is possibly the greatest Ultimate Fighting mixed martial arts champion that ever lived. His record is unbelievable. He had, if you were going to put him in comparison to other sports, he was fast becoming the Wayne Gretzky in hockey, Michael Jordan, so one of the greatest that ever was. Now, he's had in the demons, drinking cocaine,
Police incidents.
gotten to a hit and run where he hit a pregnant woman and ran from the scene of the crime. So I'm going to mention his character only in reference to, as an investigator, judging his history. He has a history. He flagged for steroids. Now, part of me, these guys live in a high-octane sport. And my understanding is they don't necessarily take these steroids for muscle, they take it for recovery. So, part of me is like, okay, this is a professional sport. But then, I was educated to the point where, let's say we're in a UFC fight, I'm enhanced. I'm hitting you with enhanced stamina, enhanced strength. I could possibly kill you, maim you, break your arm. That's now going into a crime. So he took a polygraph test, and he's saying he's coming up clean. How do you feel about that?
It's an unfair advantage when you look at steroids in any professional sports. And in addition to that, the onus is to be shouldered by the athlete. You know and understand that everything that you ingest, you're going to be tested for. So we take in consideration, I give you Alex Rodriguez a couple of years ago. He mentioned that it was his cousin that inadvertently gave him some steroids, and that's why he tested positive. The truth of the matter is, if you're a professional athlete, you need to have a laser focus on what you ingest.
Here's the quick question. He passed a poly. Should they lift the suspension?
Absolutely
Yes
not,
or no?
because the polygraph didn't fall under the auspices of USADA nor the UFC. This was something that he did on his own, just because he felt that he was guilty in the court of moral turpitude, and he just wanted to get his story out
Look at
there.
you with all these big words. That's okay.
You're the guy with the big words. This is your show. I'm just a
all right,
guest.
counselor.
Well, I think that the polygraph is just saying that he didn't knowingly take steroids. He took the steroids, he just didn't knowingly take them. What does that mean? I don't know.
But you can beat a polygraph.
And they're not admissible in court,
exactly.
so
They're
who
not
cares?
admissible. And if you just sit back and you just say, look, I got to relax myself, I want to get relaxed, and you do it over and over again, eventually you get to that point where you sit through and you pass it.
Here's my feeling. There is so much money at stake. And with this guy, where there's smoke, there's fire. And I don't give a shit that he passed the polygraph test. In my world, I've had so many cases, people can conveniently look the other way, a stroke of the pen here, and if you flagged, whether you knew it or not, you didn't do your job, your team didn't do your job around you. And
you have an unfair advantage in the sport.
There's two sports that are going on. There's the sport that the football player, the hockey player, the tennis player, the UFC fighter are in, and then there's the sport of masking the drugs. So is he champion of both? Is he champion of fighting and of hiding the usage? You flagged, you pay, fight another day after the suspension.
So this one's coming out of Iceland. We have a British Airways passenger, Ryan Carney Williams. He shows up to the flight in apparently all of his clothes. Friggin' 10 shirts, 8 pants. Apparently they didn't like him wearing that stuff. They kicked him off the flight, and he was apparently arrested later that day.
Okay, so here you got a guy getting on the airline. What he did was, he didn't want to pay the 25 or 35 bucks, and he had his entire wardrobe on his person. So I'm going to save my opinion.
Bill, Baggage fee he was trying to avoid a baggage fee of $125.
Baggage fee of $125. So he wore all his clothes on his person to get on the plane. So I'm going to hold my opinion, but I want to hear yours.
I think he's very savvy to do that. And I don't think, I mean, so what? So he was wearing a bunch of clothes. You know what it reminded me of? When my clients are going into prison, that's exactly what they do. They layer on a bunch of clothes because it's going to be very expensive in prison to buy clothes. That's exactly what they do.
Well, that tells me, counselor, you're not doing too good a job when your clients are going to prison.
Listen, sometimes a negotiated plea requires prison time.
We want the attorney. Nobody goes to jail.
All right, Doc. What do you think on this one?
This is a very frugal guy. You know the funny thing? I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was a millionaire on the low. He probably has his first dollar tucked away in a drawer.
Right.
I mean, do I think it's ludicrous? Absolutely. But it's very comedic when we look at it. Because this is not the norm, so to speak. So had I saw a guy and I was sitting next to him, hey, I might even take one of his shirts while I was on the plane. But the truth of the matter is he's a nitwit. They should have ejected him from the plane.
So you're both saying yes?
I think there has to be more to this story. He might have been rude because, so what? I looked at pictures of him. It didn't seem crazy.
His flexibility might have been altered. And you know, one of the things that we look at the TSA perspective.
Gosh, you're giving me this Congress answer. Are you saying yes? Do you let him on the plane? Yes or no?
No.
You say no.
Why not?
No. You say yes.
No.
Okay, why do you say no?
Because if you let him on, then everyone has the ability to do
well,
this.
you took my answer. This is my thought. I
read your mind, Bill.
I'm gonna take both your answers.
Totally BS.
I'm gonna say both. I'm gonna say both. This is why I'm gonna say both.
You can't say both, Bill.
Sure I can.
No, you got to pick a side. You got to either go with her or with me.
When you
or be balanced.
When you get pulled over by a cop.
That's no excuse.
When you
got to take a side.
Oh, you're awful loud today. When you get pulled over by a cop, he has the discretion to issue a summons or not, right?
Absolutely.
And I think there's a huge mistake. It's a combination of they're hiring people, lowest common denominator, minimal training, lack of what I would call street smarts.
I agree with you there.
Right? And they limit the discretion. Well, this is what it says in the manual to do. So you take it on a case-by-case basis. And you don't base it on race, creed, or color. You base it on answers and actions, questions that you ask and the actions that you receive. And I'll tell you why I wouldn't say a blanket yes. While it is comically funny, and I'm not going to count this guy's money because I don't want him counting mine. He may not have had $125. So it was a unique way. I'll give him points for ingenuity. And if I was at the airline, I probably would have shelled out the $125 to let him get his bags on the plane. But to your point, what if everyone did it? Do you let everyone on that plane wear 10 layers of clothing? Now I'm going more to the safety reason for terrorism because, unfortunately I may get in trouble for doing this. I've done a little test myself. I've gotten on to pass the gate with, by mistake with knives, etc.
You got to be careful with that, bro.
Right. It's amazing.
Federal offense.
Now if I'm wearing eight layers of clothing, now it becomes a safety and security issue to me. And so if I'm going to let, 3 guys that are looking shady and sweating, looking left and right, and maybe it's because of the 8 layers of clothing, but maybe it's not, I'm going to take that. I want that discretion to say, no, you're off, versus the poor granny who can't afford that $125. So I'm going to say, TSA needs to up their game, up their common sense, and get some more street smarts. All right, Alberto.
So, last story for the day. This one's coming out of Maryland. Chelsea Manning is running for the U.S. Senate. Is that a problem? After all, the former U.S. Army private leaked confidential and sensitive documents to WikiLeaks. So, take it away.
Okay, again, I'll hold my opinion.
Chelsea Manning is an asshole. I'm an ex-Army officer. So
thank you for your service.
And thank you for yours in the NYPD. Mm-hmm. So I understand the magnitude of leaking this type of information. You now put troops in a peril of danger based on you leaking this information. The Obama administration pardoned Chelsea Manning, which I thought was an atrocity to say the least. But now, to top it off, to throw egg in our face, he's going to run for office and run for, she is going to run for office in the Senate. Imagine if, worst case scenario, she was elected and now participates on the Armed Services Committee. Is that a slap in the face?
Okay, so now what about when people say, you know, he is a hero for doing that, for informing? He's a hero, he's a whistleblower. What do you say to that?
I say he's an asshole, he's a treasonous, and in no way, shape, or form should he be a participant in our democratic society as an elected official.
Okay, I like your reserved opinion. You're very murky with that. I wasn't sure where you stood. Okay.
I'm just surprised that somebody that's a convicted felon can run for senator. I mean, if you were a convicted felon, there's lots of jobs that you cannot.
Wasn't he pardoned? I believe he was pardoned by the Obama.
The sentence was commuted.
It was commuted? Okay.
So that doesn't mean that his conviction still stands.
No, if it was commuted, right, by all means.
So that bothers me. I mean, it bothers me that, you know, my dad, not that he's committed any crimes, but wouldn't be able to get a job out of school as you know, whatever, or at McDonald's. But then this guy can run for Senate. So that's very surprising. I blame Trump for this because it's celebrities
trying. Trump had nothing to do with this guy. What are you kidding me?
This guy wants to be a celebrity, or he is this woman wants to be is a celebrity and now thinks that she can run for office. So I blame Trump for this.
But Trump in no way, shape, or form was a provocateur.
All right, so let me give you, and I try and break it down. I'm from the Bronx, and I try and break it down in common sense.
The Bronx, right?
So here you got a guy who was passing top secret sensitive information illegally, right? Now he's a dude when he did that. He's a dude when he did that, putting people's lives in danger. Then, where you literally have veterans dying, waiting online for health care because they're not getting proper health care. They're dying, waiting online to get, you know, chemotherapy or medicines or operations. This man, you know, decides to become a woman on our dime, on our time. We, the people, pay for that operation. He does 7 years. A president, whether I agree with it or not, exonerates, oh, he did enough time for that. But now running for U.S. Senate. Now, if this person wins, we get the politicians we deserve. If people are that askew, and I've been arguing about this on social media, where people are saying, he's a patriot or she's a patriot, and the fact that they exposed whistleblower. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor. They have whistleblower laws. There are protocols to go through. So what do we call this? Undocumented traitor? You know, I love these new labels. You know, illegal alien is now undocumented immigrant. I know that touches a sore spot with you. That'll be for another time, Counselor. But like, I love these new categories we have. So I think it's a sad state where you have someone that can commit treason, you know, give away government secrets, and then try and take the high position and be thought of as a hero. It just bothers me. You know what? Just, you know, fade away. Fade away.
It's
no hero.
catastrophic, to say the least.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys. It was great, even though it was hot. Looking forward to doing this again with you guys. I love your opinions. And I want to tell everyone at lawandcrime.com, thank you for the opportunity of letting me and my friends give our opinions. Have a great day.
Good morning. I'm Stacey Delicat. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Law and Crime Network. We have a big day ahead as we continue to hear victim testimony in the sentencing hearing of Dr. Larry Nassar. He is the MSU doctor, the doctor to the USA Gymnastics team, who has been accused by more than 150 women of sexual abuse. He pled guilty to 10 counts, and he will be sentenced to anywhere between 40 and 125 years behind bars, rather. Today is the fourth day we will be hearing victims testify about the abuse they suffered at the hands of Nassar, and is sure to be compelling, as it has been thus far. But first, I want to talk about some of the other cases we've also been following here. Want to let you know that the case of Jason King, the former U.S. Marine charged in a DUI crash that killed 2 young medical students in San Diego, jury deliberations are on hold until Monday in that case, so we will have the latest next week. In the meantime, the other big trial we're filing, William Woodward, you can click on your screen to the right of this screen and stream that trial live as it continues today. And joining me on set, I have Ron Blitzer this morning, senior editor of Law and Crime and a former prosecutor. Ron, thanks so much for being here. So it's been a busy few days in Michigan, and compelling, as we have heard from so far 68 victims of Larry Nassar. We have learned now that the total number of people expected to testify is set to be about 117. So far we've heard from 68. Probably this is going to go into next week at this point, which the judge has said. What to you has stood out as some of the most compelling testimony?
For sure. Yesterday, Lindsay Lemke, the MSU gymnast, her testimony was extremely compelling. She not only really tore into Larry Nassar, addressing him directly, but she called out individuals within her university who she felt enabled him and were almost as guilty, if not just as culpable as Nassar.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because also new this morning, calls are intensifying for the president of MSU, Lou Anna Simon, to resign. Actually, the student government at Michigan State last night held a meeting. They voted unanimously, a vote of no confidence in Simon. They want her and others to resign because there have been reports apparently dating back 20 years, according to a report that came out yesterday in the Detroit Free Press, that over the course of 2 decades, victims came forward to people at MSU to complain of abuse by Nassar, whether it was coaches, senior coaches, others in the athletic department, and nothing was done. So this isn't looking that good for MSU officials right now, certainly.
Oh, certainly not. And it brings to mind what happened with Jerry Sandusky at Penn State, and how there were other officials at the university who ended up getting in trouble as a result. So we'll see what happens with other officials and figures at Michigan State now.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the Sandusky case, and I know that MSU's spokesperson has come out and said, no, that was different because those people who went to jail in the Sandusky case, you know, they were specifically trying to cover up abuse. This wasn't the case here, but a lot of lawsuits already filed against MSU, and do you think there's a chance down the road there could even be criminal charges against officials at MSU?
It's hard to say right now. We still don't know exactly how much people knew or what they were doing and what their roles were in this, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you know, another big talking point out of court, so to speak, yesterday, the judge in this case, Rosemary Aquilina, took some time out to read a note. Nassar actually hand-wrote her a 6-page note in which he basically said he didn't want to hear from the victims because it was too hard for him to hear from the victims. It was hurting his mental health. He accused Aquilina of creating a media circus, claimed she wanted him to sit up in the box next to him so that she could have the cameras on him. She was clearly pretty incensed by this. That's why she read parts of the letter, even called him delusional, and said, you know what, I have I don't have a dog in this game. This is about letting the victims have their day. And she said spending 4 or 5 days listening to them is significantly minor considering the hours of pleasure you had at their expense and ruining their lives. But I think a lot of people were certainly quite outraged to hear that Nassar had the nerve to write a letter saying, this is too hard for me to listen to this testimony.
Yeah, you have woman after woman appearing in court talking about the long-lasting effects that his abuse had on them emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and to this day, how they're still not over it. Even in cases where the abuse happened years and years ago, they're still having problems in their relationships, problems in their day-to-day life. And for him to say, oh, this is too much for me to hear my victims telling me about this because it's affecting my mental health, That was
it's pretty
really
outrageous. And as we talk about this, Ron, we have a live feed coming out of the courtroom right now where you see Larry Nassar has entered the courtroom. We're still waiting for the judge to come in. Again, this is set to be the 4th day of testimony. We've already heard from 68 victims. We expect to hear from at least 30 to 40 more in testimony that is expected to stretch through next week. You mentioned some of the really impactful testimony, people whose lives were ruined, the therapy they had to seek, panic attacks. What was hard for me to watch was the parents whose daughters have committed suicide because of mental health problems related to this abuse.
Oh, absolutely. You see parents who have been struggling along with their children, and now, as you mentioned, cases of suicide where now they have to live with this pain, not only of the abuse itself, but now the serious repercussions of losing their children as a result of this. We've also heard from coaches who've spoken. There was one coach who summed it up nicely and said, "For the record, go to hell," to Nassar. That was the other day. So this isn't just the individual victims who were affected. This was everyone who was close to them as well.
Yeah, I want to mention one of the people in the courtroom. Take a look at our live picture right now. Olympic gold medalist Ali Raisman. She, of course, came forward in November in a big 60 Minutes interview when she said, "I'm not going to be silent about this anymore," and she came forward talking about the abuse. She's among the victims we are going to hear from today. We've already heard from several Olympic medalists. You mentioned one of them, but Kayla Mulroney is another one. We didn't hear from directly, but her statement was read in court yesterday. She said Nassar was a monster of a human being. She also said she was, pretty furious that no one in USA Gymnastics had done anything. Let's go to live court right now and listen in as we get ready to hear day 4 of testimony.
I'd also like to remind everyone that there can be no talking and minimal noises while anyone is speaking. That is out of respect for the speaker as well as for the court reporter. And if you need anything, my name is Emily. I am the law clerk. We also have, I'm sorry everyone has met Angela and Becca in the back. So we will begin shortly. All rise.
Thank you. You may be seated. We are back on the record on People versus Larry Nassar, docket 17-526FH. Counsel for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Angela Popolitis, P58430, on behalf of the Michigan Department of Attorney General.
Good morning, Your Honor. Robbie Liddell, on behalf of the people with the Michigan Attorney General's Office, P68287.
Good morning, Your Honor. Chris Allen, Assistant Attorney General for the People, P75329.
Good morning, Your Honor. Laura Moody, Chief Deputy Attorney General. The number is 15994.
Thank you. We also have Detective Lieutenant Andrea Munford from the Michigan State University Police Department, the officer in charge.
Thank you. On behalf of defendant.
Good morning, Your Honor. Matt Newberg on behalf of Larry Nassar. Be seated to my left.
And we have just
we represent
civil attorneys seated at council table. All right. Thank you. I don't have any objection to that in this crowded courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next.
Judge, the next survivor that you will hear from reached out to me earlier this week to determine whether she could speak today. She has not publicly disclosed her abuse, but is comfortable with being publicly identified today. And I'd like to introduce you to Jordan Weber. Ms. Weber.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Jordan Weber, JORDYNWIEBER.
Thank you. What would you like me to know?
I first of all want to thank you for allowing us to speak here. I thought that training for the Olympics would be the hardest thing that I would ever have to do, but in fact, The hardest thing I've ever had to do is process that I'm a victim of Larry Nassar. It has caused me to feel shame and confusion, and I've spent months trying to think back on my experience and wonder how I didn't even know this was happening to me and how I became so brainwashed by Larry and everyone at USA Gymnastics, both whom I thought were supposed to be on my side. I started seeing Larry Nassar at the age of 8 right here in my hometown of Lansing. He was known as the best gymnastics doctor in the world. Everyone at my club, on the U.S. national team, and across the country saw Larry, and everyone said the same thing. He was a miracle worker, and he could fix just about anything. I was treated by Larry for any and all of my injuries from ages 8 till I was 18. And it wasn't long before he had gained my trust. He became a safe person of sorts. And to my teenage self, he appeared to be the good guy in an environment that was intense and restricting. He would try to advise me on how to deal with the stresses of training or my coaches. He would bring us food and coffee at the Olympics when we were too afraid to eat too much in front of our coaches. I didn't know that these were all grooming techniques that he used to manipulate me and brainwash me into trusting him. And when I was 14 years old, I tore my hamstring in my right leg. This was when he started performing the procedure that we are all now familiar with. I would cringe at how uncomfortable it felt. He did it time after time, appointment after appointment, convincing me that it was helping my hamstring injury. And the worst part was I had no idea that he was sexually abusing me for his own benefit. I knew it felt strange, but he was the national team doctor. Who was I to question his treatments, or even more, risk my chance at making the Olympic team or being chosen to compete internationally? And after all, he was recommended by the national team staff, and he treated us monthly at all of our national team camps. I had even talked to my teammates, Allie Raisman and Michaela Maroney, about this treatment and how uncomfortable it made us feel. None of us really understood it. After I made the Olympic team, I suffered a stress fracture in my right shin. It was extremely painful to tumble and land using my legs, but I fought through the pain because it was the Olympics, and I knew it would be probably my only shot.
Can you slow down, Jim? Still relying
Yes,
on
ma'am.
your nervous. I appreciate that. Just a little bit.
Our bodies were all hanging by a thread when we were in London. Who was the doctor that USAG sent to keep us healthy and help us get through? The doctor that was our abuser. The doctor that is a child molester. Because of my shin, I couldn't train without being in extreme pain, and it affected the number of routines I could do to prepare before the competition. And ultimately, it made me feel less prepared than I should have been. I didn't qualify to the all-around competition, and I went through a dark time right before we won the team gold. Now I question everything about that injury and the medical treatment I received. Was Larry even doing anything to help my pain? Was I getting the proper medical care? Or was he only focused on which one of us he was going to prey on next? What was he think about when he massaged my sore muscles every day? Now I question everything. To this day, I still don't know how he could have been allowed to do this for so long. My teammates and I were subjected to his medical care every single month at the National Team Training Center in Texas. He was the only male allowed to be present in the athlete dorm rooms to do whatever treatments he wanted. He was allowed to treat us in hotel rooms alone without any supervision. He took photos of us during training and whenever else he wanted. Nobody was protecting us from being taken advantage of. Nobody was even concerned whether or not we were being sexually abused. I was not protected, and neither were my teammates. My parents trusted USA Gymnastics and Larry Nassar to take care of me, and we were betrayed by both. And now, the lack of accountability from USAG, USOC, and Michigan State have caused me and many other girls to remain shameful, confused, and disappointed. I'm angry with myself for not recognizing the abuse, and that's something I'm struggling with today. But even though I'm a victim, I do not and will not live my life as one. I'm an Olympian. Despite being abused, I worked so hard and managed to achieve my goal. But I want everyone, especially the media, to know that despite my athletic achievements, I am one of over 140 women and survivors whose story is important. Our pain is all the same, and our stories are all important. And now, the people who are responsible need to accept responsibility for the pain they have caused me and the rest of the women who have been abused. Larry Nassar is accountable. USA Gymnastics is accountable. The U.S. Olympic Committee is accountable. My teammates and friends have been through enough, and now it's time for change because the current and future gymnasts do not deserve to live in anxiety, fear, or be unprotected like I was. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words. You have an Olympian voice. People will listen to you. I've listened to you. You are really very strong, not just as an athlete, but as a woman, as a survivor. I know you'll get past this because of that strength, because you had the strength to come here and talk. It's really important because what you're doing is helping to set a new precedent that all victim survivors should speak out, and that all victims have a right to speak out. And your young self did not know that, but you have already, with what you've done in our community and so many others and in the world, molded so many young minds and people. What you've just done now is equally important, maybe more important, because they will listen to you. They will speak out like you. They want to be you. You have nothing to be ashamed about. I'm so honored that you came to tell your story here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next survivor is a minor, and she will be accompanied by her mother, and they've asked me to stand with them as well, and I was happy to do that.
She's okay with being identified?
I want to put that on the record and confirm that before I...
All right. Let me know when you're ready.
This is Chelsea's mom, Chelsea Zerfus, and I'll let you question her mom. This is also her coach, who's going to be standing with us as well.
All right, thank you. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you. Can you put your hand down? Could you state and spell your name for the record?
Roberta Zerfas, ROBERTAZERFAS.
And you are the mother of the beautiful young woman in front of me?
Yes, I am.
And how old is she?
15.
And you know, as a minor, she does not have to be identified.
Yes, I do.
And you've had an opportunity to discuss what's going to happen here today, that she will be public, her name, everything that she says will be public?
Yes.
And she and you are okay with that?
Yes, we are.
And do you believe that's in her best interest?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Just for the record, I do have a photograph for the court.
Ma'am, no one forced, threatened, or promised you anything to make this decision, is that correct? I'm asking your mother. Is that correct? You've not been promised anything to testify, or be paid to testify, or anything? You're doing this at your own freedom?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, nice loud voice, and slow. I need to hear your name and then spell it for the record, and then you may read your statement or simply talk, whatever you're comfortable doing. We'll
Chelsea Zerfas, CHELSCA ZERFAS.
Would you like me to know?
Thank you for having me and allowing me to be here and speak. Being a victim of sexual abuse leaves you with a horrible feeling. Larry took advantage of me and many others. He abused his powers. He horribly manipulated me and invaded my personal boundaries. I've done gymnastics ever since I was 6 years old. I love gymnastics so much and always wanted to improve. I wanted to be the best gymnast I could possibly be. I loved being in the gym and learning new skills. I was 12 years old when I started seeing Larry Nassar. When I found out that I was going to him and having him as my doctor, I was very happy and excited. Why wouldn't I be? He was known as one of the best doctors in the world. I had someone that I thought I could trust more than anything. His practices at MSU also made me safe. Why would it not? I was taught to trust doctors because they are there to help you. So I trusted Larry. You said that you would help me get better, and I believed in you. He took advantage of me along with many other innocent lives. It hurt me most when I found out that you hurt my teammates, the girls I loved most. I considered them my family. When I was seeking treatment, Nassar told me that I had torn a muscle in my stomach. He assured me that he would help me heal. After the first visit, Nassar insisted that I wore loose shorts to any appointment at MSU or his home. I didn't understand at the time what wearing loose shorts had to do with my stomach. I now realize that he did it for easier access to my body. He even managed to sexually abuse me while my mom was in the same room as me. He manipulated me so much that I didn't know what was going on. Larry acted as if he was a friend. He would greet me with a sickening smile every time I saw him. I remember him liking my posts on Instagram. It's weird to think that an older male doctor was liking a little girl's post and commenting Merry Christmas on Christmas morning. I feel that MSU was an enabler. I should have never been assaulted there along with other girls. MSU knew of the assaults from 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2004, and 2014. MSU needs to be accountable for their actions. I trusted both of them. I was told it was a legitimate medical treatment. You were so nice to me and it made it easier to take advantage of me. It's so sickening that he did that to me. Larry used an innocent 12-year-old for his own pleasures. Larry Nassar is a monster. Not only did MSU fail to keep me safe, but so did USAG. Complaints have came forward for so long and they did nothing about it. Gymnastics is supposed to be a safe and happy environment. USAG failed to keep their gymnasts safe. Shame on them. This has had a huge impact on me. I get uncomfortable about what Larry was doing to me, but he reassured me that it was legitimate medical treatment, and of course I trusted him because he was the Olympic gymnastics doctor. I got scared and avoided going to practices because the treatment made me uncomfortable, even though he kept reassuring me that it was all normal. I avoided going to practice when I knew I would have to see him. The gym was no longer a happy environment for me. Not only did I stop going to his appointments, but also physical therapy. I kept things to myself. I didn't want to have to tell my parents that I was one of the patients abused by Larry Nassar. I didn't want them to worry about me. When I finally came forward to my mom about the situation, I couldn't finish my sentences. I stood there trembling and bawling my eyes out. I didn't want to face reality. I started to get anxiety after seeing all the news reports about him. I felt like I couldn't breathe and I would tremble in fear. I have nightmares about what happened and have troubles with sleeping. I've been put on anxiety pills just so I can function throughout the day. It's hard for me to trust people because of you. I get scared and uncomfortable when I have to go to the doctors. I get scared that I'll be taken advantage of once again by another doctor, just like you did. I try my best to trust doctors, but I can't. Larry ruined that trust. I went through a time where I wouldn't go to school. I would cry uncontrollably. I felt like I couldn't be at school because I was a victim of Larry Nassar. I felt better alone in my familiar room. I've tried my best to gain back the strength I once had. Nothing is easy at all. I just knew that I couldn't let him take gymnastics away from me. You, Larry, asked for forgiveness and want us to heal. This is all your fault. We wouldn't be here in the first place if it wasn't for you. We all would be living our normal lives, but instead you caused this issue. I will never forgive you what you've done to me. You're a coward and a sickening man. You did this to me. You're the one causing all this pain. While us survivors are carrying on with our lives and succeeding, you'll be rotting behind bars where you belong. You don't deserve to see the light of day. I am not weak of this, but have grown as a person and have become stronger. I am a survivor. Here I am today facing my abuser. I'm finally being heard. I am no longer hiding my story. I ask that you give Larry and Assar the maximum sentencing possible for his horrid crimes that he has done over decades. Knowing that he will be locked up will help me feel safe. I hope that abuse is brought up more and people become aware of how big the issue really is. It makes a difference to have the abuser accountable for their actions. Thank you.
That was a very strong, brave voice, and I hope that now that you've spoken publicly, you leave your pain here with him and you live a long, happy life. You are not alone anymore. All of these people support you. Your sister survivors support you. And it's so important what you've done, because one of the first things you said is that you were so worried about your teammates and others that you did this too, and you thought of others instead of yourself. And you are, with your young voice, helping countless other young people who are in the same situation, who we don't know about. You're giving them the strength to come forward to their parent or their coach, somebody, and say no. And that's what you've done. I'm so very proud of you. This doesn't define you. This strengthens you. You've shown that today. Congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, when you're ready.
Your Honor, the next survivor is Samantha Ersch, and she is accompanied at the podium by her coach Patrick, and I'll let him give you the last name. And she has agreed to be publicly identified, and I have displayed a photograph of Samantha as well.
Thank you. And sir, what is your full name?
Patrick Hullion, Hulliung. Patrick's correct spelling.
Thank you. Ma'am, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
What would you like me to know in first state and spell your name for the record? And I know you have your statement there. Please read it at a slow pace. Okay.
I will.
Okay, so we can understand it. Okay. Thank you.
My name's Samantha Ersch. It's SAMANTHA URSCH.
You may proceed when you're ready.
Yeah. Your Honor, thank you so much for letting me speak today. I have been in the courtroom all week, and I know you mentioned this is just your job, but there's a difference between doing your job and doing it extraordinarily. You are helping all of us to heal with your words to each of us. Once again, one thing I realized this week is it is okay if I didn't include all of my feelings into this statement I've written, because all of these strong women have spoken them at some point this week. And you are helping all of us, even the people who aren't here, begin to heal. I can't thank you enough for that. As I sit down here to write this tonight, all I can think about is how much easier it would be to not do it. To keep living my life like none of this ever happened, just like I did for 5 years between my senior year of college and September 13, 2016. However, it's time for me to move on, and this is how I'm going to start. I fell in love with the sport of gymnastics when I was 3 and competed until I was 22.
Over the years, I've been proud to call myself a gymnast. But in my senior year at Central Michigan University, one doctor's appointment permanently changed the way I think about the sport I dedicated so much of my life to. To understand why, I need to tell you what happened. Throughout my gymnastics career, I was relatively healthy. No broken bones or major surgeries. That changed my freshman year of college when I tore my ACL. Coming back from surgery meant I was always the backup, fighting for a spot on my college team and pushing through the pain to do so. After my knee surgery, I began having severe muscle spasms and lower back pain. After 4 years, my last opportunity to compete was senior night, our last home meet of the season. Since I had tried everything else to help my back pain, and since Mr. Nasser was so close to CMU, many people suggested I go see him. One of my teammates was seeing him for another injury, and she called to ask if I could tag along to her appointment. Nasser agreed. My first appointment with Mr. Nasser went really well. I felt so lucky that the same man working with the Olympians made time for me. When I arrived that day, he knew exactly who I was. He knew the gymnastics club I attended, that I hadn't really competed in college, and why. He made me feel just as important as anyone else. Even better, his x-ray and assessment gave me a clear diagnosis. I was so glad to finally be able to tell my coaches and teammates why I was in so much pain that I carried around my medical records and x-rays from my visit. It was what happened at the next appointment that I never saw coming. It was gymnastics season, so my schedule was crazy, but Nasser's office was nice enough to fit me in at the end of the day. I drove an hour from Mount Pleasant to this appointment by myself, and everything just seemed to go as it had before. It wasn't until one of the office staff members entered the exam room to tell Nasser she was leaving for the evening that I thought, that's odd. I wonder if all his staff let him know when they have to leave. It wasn't until later that I realized this meant I was completely alone in the office with him. I wish I would have realized sooner. Not long after, Nasser informed me there were other things he could do to make the myofascial release and massage he was performing on my upper legs less painful. He told me it was a little invasive. I had no idea this meant he would be inserting his fingers into the most private areas of my body. My head was spinning. Is this supposed to be happening? I thought, something isn't right. Can I get an infection from this? I guess not. He has to know what he's doing. He's a doctor. When the appointment was over, he asked if I was feeling better. I wasn't sure how to answer because I wasn't sure what had just happened. I went to exit back towards the lobby where I had entered. All of the lights in the entire office were off, and he said, you can just go out this side door. I remember walking down a back stairwell, feeling mortified and dirty. I called my mom while I walked to the car, and just as I usually do when I'm walking alone after dark, I told her about the appointment, and right away she knew something didn't sound right. But I defended him. He explained why he was doing it. I don't want to talk about it. We fought as I drove. When I got back to campus, I asked a teammate if Larry, as she called him, had ever done anything similar to her. She said he wasn't a bit shy and had to do the same thing to her for another type of injury. I was able to convince myself what happened was a legitimate medical treatment. I never told anyone else. But the feeling of wrongdoing haunted my mom. 5 years later, in January of 2016, she shared what happened with who I consider to be my second parents, my club gymnastics coaches. Suddenly, a new set of hard conversations began. Once again, I defended Mr. Nasser and rationalized what happened. I was now newly engaged and had to tell my soon-to-be husband what was going on. I'll never forget the look on his face that day. He knew, just like my mom and coaches had known, something was off. I am so grateful for the bravery of Rachel Denhollander, which brought Mr. Nassar's disgusting actions to light, and all of the other women who have come forward to form this army against him. It has given me the strength I didn't have back then. Although it was only a day or two before I spoke to the police after Rachel's interview, the guilt that I didn't say something years earlier will never go away. I was older. I should have trusted my gut. But then I think back to all the conversations I had once everything initially came out, and I know why I was so afraid. Even when there were so many people making accusations, many still defended his actions. There was a different skeptical tone in the voices of people within the gymnastics community when I told them what happened. The year and 4 months since the defendant's arrest have been some of the happiest and toughest days of my life. On September 13, 2016, I was just 2 months into a brand new job with all new coworkers. Can you imagine being surrounded by people you barely know, coming to the realization that you were sexually assaulted and manipulated? Walking around your new office puffy-eyed with everyone asking if you're okay? Having to tell your brand new boss why you were an emotional wreck because you're staring at the computer with your mind in flashbacks a million miles away. How every time something small gets brought up, you feel consumed, remembering all of the details and overcome with feelings. Can you imagine planning your wedding and being nervous to share your hometown with your future in-laws, only to have them ask during the trip, "Have you seen all the stuff about that doctor on the news? Do you think he did it?" Because they're just trying to make conversation with you, not knowing that you know he did. Can you imagine days before your wedding waking up to your mom yelling throughout the house because one of the Olympians bravely shared her story, is all over the news, and instantly you're consumed with your feelings again? Can you imagine preparing to leave for your honeymoon only to get a call telling you that while you're out of town, the man that violated you will plead guilty but won't be prosecuted for what he did to you? These have been some of the highs and lows in my life over the past year and 4 months. I have so many more wonderful things to come in my life, and this ends the defendant's cloud over them. Today, I ask that for the rest of Larry Nassar's life, by receiving the maximum sentence possible, he thinks about how he changed all of ours. Because I'm not pretending it didn't happen anymore. I'm just moving past it. Thank you.
And you just took a huge step to move past it. You are strong. You're not afraid anymore. And I love your comments about Rachel, because it just takes one voice to reveal crime of any kind. And you all stand united saying no more, and not just against this defendant, but for all women. And that's one of the reasons I appreciate your comments thanking me and all of those, but I'm hoping that other judges allow extra victims who are not, as you say, not going to be a prosecution in your case, but ultimately it's a global resolution, and you matter. You and all the other voices matter, and that's why I'm allowing it, and I'm hoping that this will become normal. I have to say it's normal in my courtroom, not just on this case. I think people think it's just on this case, but if you sat in my courtroom, I always allow victims, their families, to talk. And by the way, I do the same for defendants, because that's important too. Mm-hmm. The families of defendants get affected. Yeah. And of course, defendant will have an opportunity to speak. I don't know if he will. But it's really important that word spread about all types of crimes, but especially those against minors. So you are part of this strong army, as you've all called yourselves. I think you're all superheroes, with Rachel being your leader. But you're not afraid. You're one very strong voice, and you're also individual voices who go out there in the world and will continue to speak. You don't have anything to be ashamed or afraid of or to cry about anymore. Leave it all here and go out and be happy, because that's what you want and that's what you deserve. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, just one moment to prepare for the next. It's going to be a little bit different. Okay, the next speakers you'll hear from, the next survivors, are sisters. They are both minors. Come on up, girls. And they're going to be accompanied by their parents, their mother and their father, Dr. Johnson as well. But I know that we want to make sure that we're making a record before I disclose their name. But I am told, and I want to make sure nothing has changed, or if it has, to let me know, that they wish to be publicly identified. Is that accurate? Okay.
Can I just have the parents step forward? I just need to make a record of this because it's important. Could you please each raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes. I do.
Thank you. Put your hand down. Could you please state and spell your name for the record, sir? You first.
My name is Brad Johnson, B-R-A-D Johnsson.
All right. You can just stand. You're going to get something in your neck. If you do that, we have a lot of technology, so we can make it louder if we need to. Just keep your voice louder. All right.
Sure.
And ma'am, your name?
It's Kelly Johnson, Kelli Johnsson.
All right. And you are the parents of the two beautiful sisters in back of you?
Yes.
Yes.
And I understand that they are minors?
One is.
Okay. Which one?
Maddie.
Madeline.
All right. And what is, and before you tell me her names, how old is she?
15.
15. And do you believe it's in her best interest to speak?
We do.
Yes.
And you've talked about this with her?
We
Yes.
have.
And you know the whole world is watching her words, her voice. Everything will be publicized, or could be.
Yes.
Yes.
And you think that she can handle that?
We do.
Yes.
And no one has forced, threatened, coerced you, paid you anything, promised you anything for this. Is that correct?
No.
No.
Right.
Yes.
Correct or
It's correct.
That is
Your Honor.
correct.
It's one of those double negatives we in America do. I just need to make sure it's correct for the record.
Yes, it's
All
correct.
right. So at this time, I will ask your daughters to step forward, give me their name, and spell their names, and you can come close to them or however you wish. And if they need help, you can give them a hug or whatever you need to do. All right, so for the record, who's going first?
I am.
The younger one.
Older one.
The older one. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I'm sorry. Okay. And could you tell me your name and spell it?
My name's Kara Johnson, Karajohnsson. And I would just like to thank you again for letting us share our story.
You may proceed.
Your Honor, I would like to address the defendant. I am writing this in response to your actions, Mr. Nassar, for not following proper medical conduct and, in result, exploiting hundreds of young girls, including myself, at such a vulnerable time. The pain you have caused me mentally and emotionally is unexplainable and has been impacting my life heavily, especially these past few months. I am currently a senior in high school. I should be focusing on my classes exams, upcoming tennis season, and college search. Instead, I am here and have been here for months, hoping that after this is all over, I can finally be a senior in high school again. You took advantage of your authoritative powers as my doctor, and in result took my innocence instead of healing me. I am hurt and confused, as you placed me into a position that not only made me insecure, but was extremely inappropriate and uncomfortable. I remember the anxiety I would have entering the office, knowing how the appointment would most likely go, and telling myself it was normal to feel that queasy ache in the pit of my stomach, that you were performing those procedures for the right reasons. I remember telling myself that you were safe and that I should trust you with my body, as you were a doctor for athletes across the country that I looked up to. My dad is a DO, and you knew that at the time when I was your patient. When he would show up to my appointments with me, you wouldn't do your typical procedure that I became used to you performing. I was uncomfortable at the appointments without my father, but maintained trust in you, as the framed images of the patients on your wall told an incredible story of a great doctor who could heal anyone. I remember the one appointment that has been played over and over in my mind and has given me nightmares still to this day. You had me get an x-ray for my hips and back and then check them out, with a strange obsession on how my hips were not fully developed yet and that you could tell my period had not started. You then made me change into those strange shorts you had in your cabinet, shorts that were so big I was swimming in, and that gave you easy access to my body. I was told to lay stomach down on the table, where you proceeded to stack white towels between my mom and I and adjust the table to an angle where she couldn't see, which I remember feeling weird about. I immediately shut down all of those thoughts as I told myself you were going to fix me, and that it was okay to feel uncomfortable, that you were going to heal my pain. You then pulled my shorts down, moved my underwear over to the side, and started touching me, without consent, without telling me what you were going to do, and if that wasn't bad enough, with your gloveless hands. You had your eyes closed and continued to molest me. After a few minutes of this, you just left the room, leaving my mom and I extremely uncomfortable while my bare butt was out. You came back into the room 5 minutes later with a tube of some kind of lubricant. You then continued this procedure using the lubricant, and I began to feel numb down there. I then at that point wondered how what you were doing would fix the pain I had from jamming my hip after a cross-country race. After about 30 minutes of this, you smacked my butt, said, "All right, we are done here, sweetie," and then pulled up my shorts. You said quietly to me that if I was ever on my period during one of your appointments, to let you know, so you could change things up a bit. After that appointment, I was supposed to go back to school, but everything seemed cloudy and I had the urge to shower, as I felt dirty and gross. I took a 45-minute shower that day, and that feeling never left. I was only 13 years old. You manipulated me into believing that you were the only doctor that could fix me, and that I had to have you or no one at all, and for so long I believed that to be true. I still cannot get over the grief that you have caused me by creating the false relationship of trust and custody, and I cannot believe that I felt safe and in good hands when I was with you. You fooled me, telling me of your family stories, telling jokes to attempt to make me more comfortable, and liking my social media posts. Some of the things that I now realize were major red flags and should have never been tolerated. I should have went with my gut and told someone that something felt very off. But how was I supposed to know at the age of 13 what was medically acceptable and what the boundaries were? I am disgusted by your actions and with the fact that even under investigation, you had the ability and power to continue these procedures on patients such as I without following the medical restrictions you were placed under. These few months have been extremely difficult for me, as I have been struggling through depression and fighting off suicidal thoughts. I assumed I was going crazy, but after hearing all of these other girls speak, I am realizing that I am not crazy at all, and that I am suffering from something you did to me for so many years. I never used to question the purpose of my life, and I never used to have nightmares about being raped, which is something that I am now extremely paranoid about, even though it has never happened to me. You have placed so much fear in my life, Larry, and I will never be able to get back what you have taken so effortlessly from me. Your actions, along with all of the other actions of abusers in this country, shall not go unnoticed. Trust is a hard thing to earn, and personally has been something much harder to develop since you've molested me. I now know that I cannot second guess myself when it comes to decisions with my body, and it sickens me to know that I was not the only one who had her innocence taken away without even truly knowing what was going on. It is terrifying how sick perpetrators like you are given the power to do such terrible things to innocent children for so long and almost get away with it. So many people believed you were innocent, as you have brainwashed us all into believing that you were someone of great medical integrity. And I am angry at those who have been shutting down this case for so many years, and who have not taken the degree of this sexual abuse seriously. I used to be sorry. I felt bad that you had to touch me, and I grew very insecure. I am so glad that I no longer have to feel bad for you, and I'm glad that you will be paying for your actions the rest of your life. You are now a powerless man. God knows of all the innocent victims you took advantage of, and the acts of betrayal you have performed. The Lord is my shield, and I know that through him I am capable of all things, and that I will persevere through this, and that even the most evil of sins like the ones you have committed cannot destroy who I am, and will have major consequences that will follow you for the rest of your life. God has spoken to me these past few days, and I'm finally starting to leave the dark place I have been in for so long. You cannot take advantage of me anymore, Mr. Nassar, and for that I am grateful. Due to your malpractice and of the pain you have caused all victims, I believe that you should be in prison for a minimum of 40 years to reflect on what you have done. Your Honor, I would like to thank you again for allowing me to share my statement today.
You are very brave. You're not in darkness anymore. You're in lightness. You have just opened doors, along with your sister survivors, for others to speak out, and that's really important. And he can't fool you, as you've said, but he also can't fool anybody else who's heard your words. You're a tower of strength, and with your sister, who I'm going to hear from in a moment, your sister survivor, you also have all of the sister survivors. You are all in this horrible club, but you know what? It's also a great club because you're all towers of strength who are going to get past this, and your message is being heard by the world. And I know you're going to graduate, congratulations, from high school and go on to college and keep talking to men and women alike about this, because college is another place where we see this happening over and over and over again to young people who don't know or put themselves in bad situations. And I know you will be one of those voices that they will listen to. So you are a proud example. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Madeline, Madeline, Johnson, Johnson.
And how old are you today?
15.
And you're comfortable speaking?
Yes.
All right, very good. You seem very confident. So I want to hear those words nice and loud, all right?
All right.
Thank you.
The first time I went to see Nassar, I was 12 years old. Being the little gymnast I was beyond excited I had the opportunity to have Nassar as my doctor. He was spoken so highly of, as he was known as the gymnastics doctor. I was slowly injuring my back more and more with every practice, until one night my pain was so bad I couldn't even breathe without breaking down into tears. My parents were contemplating whether or not to take me to the ER, but my mom insisted she would just text Nassar to get me into an appointment, as this seemed like the most beneficial way to get treatment. My mom texted him, and he got me in right away the next day. I couldn't hardly wait to see Nassar, because with all of the stories I have heard about him supposedly treating Olympic gymnasts, I knew he was capable of finally relieving my back pain. When I walked into his office the next day, I was immediately in awe. His walls were covered with a substantial amount of pictures of Olympic gymnasts, all which included a little message and a signature.
I felt so lucky that I got to have the same doctor as all of my idols in the gymnastics world, and the doctor who was known as the best of the best. My appointment with Nassar this day was at least 2 hours long. After he addressed my injuries, he got started into the treatment. Nassar approached so many different techniques, each one relieving my pain by a slight amount. Then, Nassar pulled on my leg to unjam my hip, and at this point, almost all of my back pain was gone, but he still continued to try to fix me. I felt his hands slowly make their way from my lower back down towards the seams of my shorts. He asked me to flip over onto my back, and as I was doing so, he jokingly told me that the next thing might be uncomfortable. Before I could even reply to his comment, he moved his hands up my shorts. He told me he was going to push on my pubic bone, but instead I felt his fingers touch a different part of my body, a part of my body that has never been touched by anyone before. I felt all of my muscles become tense, but I tried to tell myself to relax because he was a doctor and he knew what he was doing. The next appointment was just for my sister, but I went along too. She was wearing pants, and he made her change into these shorts that he had in a box inside his cabinet. Because of this, I understood that it was also necessary for me to wear shorts every time I had an appointment. I later learned Nassar wanted us to wear loose-fitting shorts so he would have easy access to the places he wanted for his own pleasure. Soon enough, I was back in his office with back pain again. My mom decided my dad should take me to this appointment, as he is a physician, and he could attempt to learn what Nassar was doing so I wouldn't have to go into his office every time I hurt my back. I told my mom I did not want my dad to take me because that would be awkward. My mom asked me why it would be awkward, but I didn't answer this question. I thought that if my mom didn't think what he was doing under my shorts was uncomfortable, then why should I? Before this appointment, I made sure I was showered, as I was preparing for him to have to touch under my shorts again. Once we went over symptoms, he diagnosed me with the same thing as before. My dad was actively watching an attempt to learn what Nassar was doing to help treat me. During this appointment, Nassar didn't place his hands anywhere on my bare skin. I didn't even have to remove my sweatpants to reveal my shorts I had under them. After this appointment, I remember thinking about him not doing the same things as he did before, but I never mentioned it as I felt uncomfortable talking about it, and it did not seem important or necessary to say. Once again, I injured my back. I followed through with the same routine of making sure I was clean before I went in and remembering to wear shorts under my sweatpants. By this time, my mom and I thought we were going to know what we were expecting, so my mom did not pay much attention to what Nassar was doing. I was lying on my back, and Nassar slowly slipped his hands up my shorts, this time saying nothing about what he was doing before he started. He didn't only touch inappropriate areas, but he moved my underwear to the side, and his ungloved hands massaged my bare skin. Once he began this, I looked over at my mom, but she was looking down. I looked at Nassar, only to see his body was blocking my hips, so even if my mom did look up, she could not see what he was doing to me. His face was turned away from me, his eyes closed and squinting, and he was heavily concentrated on what he was doing. Nassar did this for roughly 5 minutes, then said, "Okay, kiddo," and made me turn over onto my stomach. He would then push on my lower back, which relieved pain for the moment, but once he stopped, it immediately returned. He asked me for my pain level, and I told him it was the same as before, the answer I'm sure he wanted to hear. He repeated this procedure several times until I realized the only way I could get him to stop was if I lied and said my pain was all gone. He had me lie on my back, and he yanked on my leg to unjam my hips, and that's when my back actually felt a little better. After this appointment, I knew my back was slowly getting worse, and Nassar's treatment was no longer helping me. I felt uncomfortable and extremely dirty after leaving these appointments. My mom asked me if my back actually felt better, and I lied to her saying it did because I didn't want her to know that Nassar couldn't help me. I also didn't want her to question me on why I was lying to him about my pain levels. I felt so guilty and confused that I had felt uncomfortable with how this professional doctor with such a well-known reputation was treating me. Just as I was about to go to bed one night, an old friend texted me a video link. I clicked on the link, not knowing what to expect. This video was Rachel's video. As she went on talking about Larry Nassar sexually abusing her, I was in shock. I didn't know what to think. I ran up the stairs to tell my mom all about this video, but before I could finish explaining myself, she told me she already saw it. My mom and I sat there in silence for a while, and I felt so sick. I was thinking about all the appointments I had with Nassar, trying to decide if this was abuse or strictly a doctor's treatment. I woke up the next morning and I had felt a feeling I have never felt all 14 years of my life. I went to school and wanted nothing more than to be invisible the entire day. I did not want anyone to approach me, to talk to me, or to touch me. How I was feeling this day is difficult to describe, but it's something I will never forget and something I hope I never have to feel again. For a while, I didn't believe I was one of these sexually abused victims. I later learned that this was not true. I tried rejecting the fact that I was molested by Nassar because it seemed like the easiest way to cope. I now know I was struggling so hard to decide if it was abuse or not because I knew if I admitted to myself that it was, it would change my life so much, and it did. I always knew what Nassar did to treat me was uncomfortable, but at only 12 years old, I had no idea that it was inappropriate, illegal, and wrong. He was the doctor, I was the child, I had no idea what to think. I will never be able to stress enough how much he manipulated my family and I so he could build a strong trust with us. We put all of our trust into this man, and he had such a high title and name to live up to in the gymnastics world and to athletes in general. Nassar spent so much time on me and acted like he really, truly cared about me. Your Honor, may I speak to the defendant?
You may.
Larry, you used to be everything to all gymnasts and athletes, and now you are nothing more than a disgusting monster. You used your power and title to hurt me mentally and emotionally. You abused me, an innocent 12-year-old girl, for your own sick pleasures. You spent so much time on me, acting like you truly cared about me. Today, I am a 15-year-old girl, and throughout my years in high school, I have struggled with trust, confidence, good judgment, and for these past few weeks especially, achieving my academic goals. Everyone thinks of me as a physically and mentally strong person, but today I'm admitting to spending countless nights crying alone in my room, suffering from feeling worthless and lost. For the longest time, you deprived me of my happiness, the ability to sleep at night, and feeling of being secure. Because of you, every time I hear someone call me kiddo as you did, I think of the face you made while you were abusing me. You called me that, reassuring to yourself that I was a young, naive girl. There's a point in everyone's life when they outgrow those extraordinary dreams they had hoped they could achieve as a child and reality kicks in, when they realize the world isn't what they used to think it was. Larry, you took this from me at 12 years old. I used to be such a joyful girl and believed everyone could be forgiven for the mistakes they had made. You made me afraid of the world. I will never forget about the pain I have suffered. But Larry, after today, I will no longer suffer. But I will be joyful that you will never be able to lay your hands on another girl again. You will no longer deprive me of life. Your Honor, sometimes I think it would be easiest for me if I never knew about Nassar's abuse, but I quickly remind myself that this would be the worst case possible. If he wasn't behind bars now, he would be hurting more and more young girls with each day that passed. What he did will stick with us victims, will stay with us for the rest of our lives. Therefore, because we have to live with it, he should be sentenced to the maximum amount of years and locked up for the rest of his life. Thank you.
Thank you. I have heard you and your sister survivor speaking out as you have done and your sister has done, as all the victims have done, so victim survivors have done, helps others. And I hear that loud and clear in your insightful, youthful voice. That's what you want to do, and that's one of the reasons you and your sister are here. The world is a better place because of what you've just said and done. Both of you should be very proud of yourself. I know that now you don't feel like the world is a great place, but it really, really is. I've heard what all of you have said, and you're so wise at your tender age. And I'm taking into consideration everything in regard to sentencing. You are both worthy of everything wonderful. You don't let him take that away from you, because then he wins. And I know that your sister talked about suicide. You didn't, but I suspect you, like most of the other survivor victims, have thought about it. Please, don't. You're here today because you want a happier world and a happier life. If you leave us, he wins. I've said it to others, I'll keep saying it, because suicide is never, ever an answer. We have some incredible parents here with you. So if there are any issues, I hope that you turn to them and continue to get help. He will be behind bars, and that should make you feel safer. And you should leave the grief and sadness and unworthiness here in this courtroom. We'll sweep it away. We'll take him away.
Thank you.
Live happy lives. Thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
Your Honor, could I read a short statement?
Yes, you may.
I'm here today to address Larry Nassar, both as an osteopathic physician and the father of two beautiful girls that were cared and abused by you. Before I begin, I would like to say how proud I am of each and every survivor in this courtroom. I will never forget your stories and the pain in your voices as you so courageously tell all those stories that we've heard. As a physician, we are given the great privilege to care for our patients. What a wonderful and beautiful privilege this is. Our patients trust us with their most intimate problems, their fears, their bodies, and their history. They trust that we will care for them with compassion and respect and love, that we will do no harm. They place their trust in us without knowing us because we are physicians. We make mistakes, and occasionally these unintentional mistakes cause harm. This causes us great pain. We carry these stories with us forever, never forgetting the patient we harmed and never forgetting the pain we caused. We learn from this and we try to improve and become better caregivers, better physicians. This is not your story, Larry. The pain you caused was intentional. You did not care for these young girls with compassion, respect, and love. Your care was selfish, not selfless. Your story is dark, sinister, and pure evil. You preyed on the most vulnerable. You preyed on innocence, and you preyed on trust. You preyed on little girls and young women, God's children, and He weeps with us. Your story is very different, Larry. Your story starts with sick, perverse, and ungodly intentions. You are not a physician. You are a pedophile. You only used your degree as a platform to sexually abuse your patients, one by one, for your sick and your very perverse pleasure. You groomed your victims and plotted a course full of deceit and abuse. I hope that you have heard each and every story, and I pray that these voices resonate in you forever. You were once known as one of the elite physicians in your profession. Now and forever, you will go down in history as one of the worst humankind has to offer. A child molester, a predator, an abuser, a pedophile. You cannot escape this identity. And to each and every institution that denied responsibility for this, shame on you. For a moment, I ask that you close your eyes and think of your daughter. Do you remember her innocence? Can you see her smile? Hear her youthful laughter? Now imagine her being sexually assaulted by this man. Can you hear her scream? Or is it silent? This is our reality, and these were our children. If after that disturbing thought, after that disturbing image, you can continue to deny responsibility for fostering this abuse and allowing this monster to continue with his practice, then you have denied the truth. You have learned nothing. These institutions emphasize the importance of safe spaces. Ironically, the only safe place that was created was a safe place for Larry Nassar to molest children and young women without boundaries and without oversight. I ask you, where was a safe place for all the abused, for all of these survivors? Thank you, Your Honor.
Dustin, thank you for that very compassionate, enlightening letter and your words. May we have a copy?
I'm sorry?
May we have a copy of what you said?
Yes, you
may.
may.
We already have a copy.
No, you don't.
All right.
Yes.
Sir, I know you're speaking on behalf of your daughters. but really you're speaking on behalf of all children, and you know as a trained physician, as a good physician, that's what you are to do. And I'm so thankful that you're here and for your words, because everybody needs to hear that, and doctors need to be reminded of that. Patients need to be reminded that they can tell you anything, and if something's wrong, tell another doctor who will report it. And hopefully we have that change, because so many people didn't report here. And that's why it's so important for you all to be here. So I applaud you, and I know that your children are in great hands. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Judge, I just realized, as I've done in prior mornings, that I have not updated the court as to the number of impact statements. As of this morning, that number is 120.
Well, and as I've said, I'll give you as much time as you need. I'm clearing out my docket as we speak. So for those of you who want to be here, it looks like with that number, we'll see where we land today. We may be into Tuesday, although we're going pretty rapidly. I don't know. I just don't want to give anybody a hope that we'll finish Monday. It sounds to me like it may be Tuesday, and every day there's more added. So we'll see.
Your Honor, the next survivor to speak is Marie Anderson, and I believe she just recently decided to be publicly identified. She is accompanied by her parents, and I have a photograph of her on the screen as well.
Thank you. Mom, Dad, you can come closer if you would like, next to her. Ready?
Yes.
State and spell your name for the record, and then once you read, please read slowly, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Please state and spell your name.
Marie Anderson, M-A-R-I-E A-N-D-E-R-S-O-N.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm here today to talk with you about my experiences with Larry Nassar at Michigan State University Sports Medicine when I was 15 years old. I was a swimmer and having issues with my lower back. During my visits to MSU for back pain, Larry claimed that I needed pelvic adjustments. He would have me lie on the exam table, face up, and place my legs open like you would during a vaginal exam, but without stirrups. He would move his fingers around the outside of my vagina and anus. Then he would insert his fingers into my vagina and move them around inside of me, as well as move his fingers in and out. While his fingers were inside of me, he would also apply pressure with his other hand to the outside of my lower abdomen and massage the inside and outside of my vaginal area. This happened visit after visit. Saying this out loud to you is extremely uncomfortable for me, and I'm sure for everyone who is listening. It is supposed to be uncomfortable. I would be doing myself and the other brave women here a great disservice by shying away from what is now my truth. As I discover that this invasive treatment was not in the best interests of my health, I cannot help but reflect on the impact the entire treatment plan had during an impressionable time in my life. At the age of 15, I was naive to sexual intercourse and recall pain and embarrassment. I had my mom or dad in the room that, to my humiliation, witnessed this happening, all under the impression that they were taking me to the best available. The impact this has had on my family is indescribable. My parents, who had my best interest at heart, will forever have to live with the fact that they continually brought their daughter to a sexual predator and were in the room as he assaulted me. I wonder if the treatment plan Larry created was intended to keep me coming back in order to continue the assault. As I look back at the treatment, I remember I did not find relief with the methods that he used. I was in a full back brace and on crutches under his treatment plan. I was a sophomore in high school, and I experienced a magnitude of harsh mocking from my peers because of the large brace over my clothes paired with the crutches. This led to a multitude of hurdles, including a lack of confidence and difficulty in social situations that I still face today. I visited a therapist to discuss these issues, and I believe I will need to continue therapy for these issues, as well as the realization that I am a victim of sexual assault. The impact this continued assault had on my childhood and my growth as an adult is something I'm forced to confront and will cope with indefinitely. My perspective of medical professionals is damaged, and I have a difficult time trusting treatment opinions because I feel that I have been deceived, manipulated, and used to satisfy Larry's sexual desires. I will never regain what I've lost, and I will learn to cope with the lack of faith in a system that failed me. From Larry Nassar to the institutions that supported him for many, many years. As an alumni of Michigan State University, I am disgusted to my core that this man was able to harm so many under their responsibility. The pride I had in my alma mater is tarnished and diminishing as this continues to progress. I didn't choose to stand and publicly share my story until earlier this week. Last year, when headlines started coming out about the assault, and I had filed my report, I was sitting alone for lunch at McAllister's Deli. It was crowded, and the ladies sitting at the table next to me were having a conversation about their friend, Larry. I sat frozen as they talked about these girls who were making up these lies just for the attention. Little did they know that one of those girls, who I promise you would have been very happy with no attention at all, was sitting next to them with tears falling down onto her plate. As I stand here today, I am not the woman sitting in McAllister's, unable to find the voice to give these grown women a piece of her mind. I am also not the 15-year-old kid afraid of disappointing the adults in her life. I am able to stand here today in front of my abuser with an army of strong, powerful women behind me, asking that this man that hurt all of us withers away for the rest of his life. I have a choice to make every day on how I will grow. And while we all are moving mountains, you, Larry, will have no choice but to sit in prison and wait to die. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you so much. You aren't just moving mountains, you are saving others' lives as well who have heard your strong voice. You are strong and powerful to the core. You are confident. You are more than just a survivor victim. I think you are unstoppable. Your words ring so true, and they are meaningful beyond this courtroom, beyond this town. Across the world, people are hearing you, and you're making a difference. You're not letting those other people who didn't listen to you, who didn't want to listen to you, who are in that next booth, not knowing who you are. They know who you are. We have heard you. You are strong. You've made a tidal wave, and it's growing. Thank you so much for being here. You're amazing.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge, I'm told the next survivor initially had asked us to read on her behalf, but she is going to be reading this. Is that my understanding? Okay. And you know what? Your Honor, this is Amy Lavity, and her mother and her boyfriend are accompanying her at the podium. And I have placed on the screen a photograph of Amy as well.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes. Amy Labadie, AMYLABADIE.
Thank you. What would you like me to know?
On September 12th, 2016, I was getting ready for bed and was on my phone looking through news articles and came across the article that was published in the Indy Star about Nassar, former USA gymnastics doctor accused of abuse. I can still remember reading this and not being able to comprehend what I was reading at first and thinking, there is no way this is true. This can't be true. I remember telling Steve, did you read the article about the gymnastics doctor? And him asking me. I gave him a brief recount about the victim and what Nassar did to her. I remember him saying something like, it's a horrible world sometimes. I guess we will see how it unfolds. And then I just dropped to the floor. I swear I went completely blank after that, and it almost felt like I blacked out from the world. I know he asked me if that happened to me, and I told him yes, but went silent with words for the majority of the night. It was one of those cries so intense that you can't speak. I was in complete shock and had no idea at the time the immense emotions my body was going through. Steve just kept trying to hug me, and I kept pushing away and sobbing. The next day, I went through the workday feeling the worst I have ever felt in my entire life, not knowing how I was going to tell my mom. When I got home from work, I took my dog for a walk and then called her. I asked her if she had read the article.
She said no. I explained that I was about to tell her something horrible, that it was not her fault. I told her about Nassar molesting me during the doctor's visits at MSU Sports Medicine when we went down there for my back injury. I told her I couldn't believe that I didn't know he molested me until I read the article. She asked me questions like, "What do you mean? I was in the room with you. How could he have done this to you while I was there?" I had to explain that he must have done it in a way that she could not see his hands. I asked her if Nassar asked if he could do this to me, or if she could think of any reason why this could be. She said no to all of it. I remember being in complete denial, hoping my mom could do what she always does and comfort me, as she always does. But nothing she said to me could take away the shock that was running through my body. I loved gymnastics. I started at the age of 7 or 8 and was competing level 5 by the age of 9. It was everything to me to put on my long sleeve Leo, warm-up jacket, slick back my hair with an inch of gel, so tightly secured with my scrunchies. I competed all the way through high school. My family devoted so much time to driving me to practice, 4 to 5 days a week, and traveling around the state and country to meets all these years. In August of 2005, I sought out Nassar in hopes of getting treatment for my back. It was recommended I go see him after months and months of pain. He was said to be a world-renowned doctor, the best gymnastics doctor in the world. It made me and everybody that knew him believe he was a doctor that could fix you. Frankly, I was starstruck to even be walking into his office. Doctors of his high of stature, and any doctor, are to be inherently trusted. I now realize this level of celebrity status was a strong basis for his manipulation. Between August and December of 2005, I went down to Michigan State Sports Medicine office 3 to 4 times. The first time I walked into his office, he had me put on these shorts. They had a drawstring, but the bottoms of these shorts were really wide. There was no one else in the room aside from my mother and gymnastics coach. When he put his fingers in my vagina and anus, he would move my legs back and forth while holding my knee. I remember the pain I felt from him rubbing my legs and back. I remember this lasting for a long time. He sexually assaulted me while he was supposed to be healing me. He did this for the pleasure of his own good, not for any other reason. I ended up getting a bacterial infection after he did this one of the times because he put his fingers from my anus to my vagina without gloves. He never wore gloves when he did this. I had no idea what he was doing and that it was sexual assault or any type of abuse. As a 16-year-old, I had never been touched in this way before. But looking back on it now, it is absolutely disgusting to think about. The same thing happened every single time I saw him at Michigan State University. In January of 2006, I was at my team's season kickoff meet, the Vegas-style Invitational in Lansing, Michigan, hosted by Twistars Gymnastics and the infamous John Geddert. This was always my favorite meet of the year, not only because it was the first meet of the year, but also because Twistars was known as the best gym in the state. I always wished my parents would move to Lansing so I could go to Twistars. Little did I know. It was at this meet that I was sexually assaulted on 2 separate occasions by Nassar. He took me into the back locker room that connected between the meet and the Twistars training gym. I remember my mom asking, Do you want me to come with you two? And him saying no. He had me take my clothes off and molested me on the training table. He then had me put my Leo back on. We went into the Twistars gym while he watched me flip. He molested me again and sent me on my way to my competition. My vagina was sore during my competition because of this man. How disgusting is that to even say out loud? It baffles me that John Geddard would knowingly allow his team's doctor to see patients during their hosted meet with no documentation of who Nassar was seeing or what they were being treated for. Actually, it doesn't baffle me at all. It makes perfect sense. John Geddard was Larry Nassar's Bonnie to his Clyde. As much as we would like to sit here and think Nassar got away with this and no one knew, that's bullshit. John knew. I went to school at Michigan State University from 2007 to 2011 and graduated with a degree from Eli Broad College of Business. One of the main reasons I chose this school is because I accepted the position of the team manager for MSU Gymnastics. I was the manager for the team for 3 years. I volunteered 20 to 40 hours a week during school to go to all the practices, travel to all the meets, and spend countless hours building team camaraderie outside of the gym. I loved it. I loved the girls, I loved the dedication, and surely loved being in the gym. I used to be so proud to tell people I was the manager of the gymnastics team. I gave MSU my everything. But that has all changed now. I can't get over the fact that MSU could have done something to prevent this from happening to me. And the individuals that turned a blind eye to the monster that is Larry Nassar. I no longer am proud to have graduated from Michigan State University. I have lost all hope that the institution of this stature is trustworthy and has the students' and athletes' best interest at heart. I have suffered mentally over the last year and a half, which has greatly affected my home and work life. I will out of nowhere become angry and get in fights with my boyfriend about things that I never would have in the past. I sometimes take it out on Steve like it's his fault, but it's not. I just can't get this monster out of my head. I used to be able to work much more efficiently and never let my emotions get in the way of my success. The depression from this has caused me to miss work more than I ever used to and not be able to stay positive on work days. It is impossible to suppress the negative emotions and anger that are from Nassar's conduct. I am doing my best to keep this job and pray every day that I get through this. I know I'm going to have to seek medical advice to get through all of this. You have to understand, though, it's not easy even thinking about going to see a doctor. I don't trust doctors anymore. Now I will always struggle with letting someone who is called a doctor try to fix you. I feel like I have lost all enjoyment in life. I've never been depressed before and used to not think depression was even a thing. Until now. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to take a shower. I don't want to go out of my house or do anything. I used to go do yoga and play sports with my boyfriend, and haven't done any of that since I found out Nassar assaulted me. I used to spend time with my friends and enjoy myself. But I just feel like I am too anxious and stressed out now to be around anyone. I have lost countless hours of sleep. I have been struggling with the worst nightmares ever. I have lost weight and have trouble eating sometimes because I don't have an appetite. It's disgusting. What Nassar did is affecting my whole life. Work, friendships, my family, my sexual relationship, my physical and mental state. It's hard to see into the future and think that this will not affect me forever. Any way you look at it, I am fearful that if justice is not served, this sets a precedent for other medical professionals out there that could be doing the same thing. All that I can hope for now is that seeing him locked up behind bars for the rest of his life for what he has done to me and all of us will bring some peace in knowing that he will never see the light of day again. I also strongly hope that me standing here today, giving this horrifying impact statement, will provide all of the people of this world the strength to know when a monster is in front of your face, and that no job, no status, no level of greatness, and no gold medals are worth hundreds of little girls being sexually assaulted. We must find a way to prevent this from happening ever again. Children are naive and do not have voices, but we as adults do. The force of these other women and myself is fierce. Come hell or high water, we will take every last one of you down that could have stopped this monster. Thank you.
Thank you. Your words, your fierce words, your fierceness will help prevent not only this, what you say, it's a monster. I'm not disagreeing, but using your words, this monster, you will prevent him and others like him with your fierceness. I need you to leave your nightmares here with him between the federal court, this court, and Judge Cunningham. He's not getting out. You've given him a nightmare, one that he will relive over and over again. You are joining with your sister survivors in strength, in numbers. The numbers are growing. And your voice matters. You matter. Get out, enjoy your life, because without that, he's winning. Don't let him win. You're right, gold medals, all of that, nothing matters. Life matters. You need to live yours. You have a golden life. I want you to live it.
Okay.
Can you do that?
Yes, I can.
All right, I love the smile. It's back.
Thank you.
Keep it.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Judge, the next survivor to speak just also made the decision to be publicly identified. She's going to do great. This is Ashley Yost, and Ashley's mom. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Ashley Yost, ASHLEY YOST.
All right. Move right up to the podium, so you're next to that microphone. Keep your voice up and just talk at a pace we can understand. And your mom is here with you, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Mom, if you need to hug her, you're holding hands, that's great. Ready to proceed?
Yes.
Please do.
First, I would like to thank you for allowing not only me, but every other survivor of Larry Nassar speak their truth and have their voices heard. Your Honor, I've started and restarted this impact statement multiple times. That's because I never really knew where to begin. I also feel that Larry Nassar doesn't deserve to know how I've been impacted. He doesn't deserve to know anything about my life anymore. But this letter isn't for him. It's for you, Judge Aquilina. It's to show you the gravity of his actions and who I am now because of him. This is why I chose to be here today and chose to read this letter myself in front of everyone. I still don't know where to really start this. Everything about this whole situation is chaotic and messy, and my thoughts are never very clear. It feels like I have so much to say about everything, but yet nothing at the same time.
Can you say it a little bit slower?
Yeah.
Thank you.
See. My mind can't really focus on what Larry Nassar did for too long because it seems like it'll be just too much if I do. I thought I knew Nassar. We all thought we did. When I was 16, I job shadowed him in high school. He was the reason I was so interested in the medical field and specializing in sports medicine. He was the reason I wanted to help gymnasts in the future. When I was still thinking of becoming a doctor, I thought it would be the most amazing thing in the world to somehow have him as a mentor. Now I know how wrong all of his intentions were. The first time I stepped into one of the 2 exam rooms Larry Nassar had at MSU Sportsmed, I was 12. The last time was in June of 2016, making me 24. That's 12 years of knowing him and 1/2 of my life being treated by him. He had a reputation for being one of the best gymnastics sports medicine doctors in the world, and for him to be located so close to where I live seemed like the best luck ever. It was only when I reflected on that very first report by Rachel Den Hollander that I began to put the pieces together. Larry Nassar was not treating me, but using me. He was not the best gymnastics sports medicine doctor. He misused his role of power in order to abuse dedicated and hardworking athletes. I don't even consider him to be a doctor anymore, because a true doctor cares for their patient's well-being while he narcissistically manipulated his. In Nassar's exam rooms, there were pictures, letters, and gifts dedicated to him from his patients and thanks of how much he had helped them. I always loved walking around the room and reading them, trying to find out the newest things of his. Now I see that these were all just trophies to him. He got to see every day how he manipulated people while they had no idea what was going on. He gave me a pin from one of the Olympics he had attended. It made me feel so special at the time. I had it sitting out on my desk and always noticed it whenever I walked by. Now it makes me feel sick. He wanted me to feel special. He wanted me to feel like he really cared, because that's what a person like him does. He would always ask about my family and how they were doing, as well as sharing how his family was doing. He would call me Goof or my Ashley sometimes, and I thought it was out of care and kindness. Now I see how wrong all of that was and how he manipulated me into thinking he actually cared. I also look back seeing how unnecessary his actions were. There were times when he would go through his routine, but without penetration, and I would still feel better. It only clicked with me after all of the news reports how he never should have had to use penetration in the first place if I was able to feel better without it. It also makes sense how he used distraction to never really let me think about what he was doing. He would hold a conversation with me for the entirety of the visit so that I had something to focus on. He used his personal life and his family to make it seem as if he actually cared and would ask about mine as well. It's difficult to say how his actions have fully impacted me. I think that's because I still haven't completely processed everything. Part of me wants to believe that this is all just some horrible nightmare and everything is okay. The other part knows that that's what grooming does to you. It makes you second guess yourself and question reality. It makes you want to feel sympathy towards your assaulter. Because I was groomed for so long, starting at such a young age, this whole ordeal is still something I struggle with. There's one part of me that when hearing the other girls' stories of how he made them feel special has actually made me feel hurt. I know that this reaction is a result of what he did to me. However, there's another part of me that knows I'm a part of this community of strong and powerful, beautiful, courageous women. In the very beginning of all this, it was difficult to think that he was capable of being this type of person, a monster. My mind fully rejected the thought in the beginning, and for a long time, despite eventually acknowledging the situation, I would dissociate myself from being a part of it. I'm slowly accepting everything for what it is and working on seeing Nassar for the monster he is. That is also why I chose to be here today. The last time I saw Larry, he was still this well-renowned doctor who knew how to help me with my back pain. I was sad that I was going to be treated by him anymore. The mental image I still have is a positive one. I needed to be here today so that I can change that. I need to see what my new reality is. I need to change 12 years worth of knowing a person and feeling that I could trust them completely. I have been in therapy every week for the past year plus, now trying to learn coping skills for my fears and learning to trust myself and instincts again. In the past, I have struggled with anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts with no explanation. This was prior to understanding what Nassar had been really doing to me. I still struggle with anxiety and depression, and although I have yet to completely accept all the events that have happened this past year, I do have these moments where reality hits me, and it hits hard. I feel like I can't breathe, I can't think straight, and everything feels upside down. And this is something my family has to deal with. Sorry. They have to watch me have these breakdowns, and I know it hurts them because there's nothing they can really do to help. I have to work through it on my own. My brain has to process the magnitude of the situation. I still try to keep my breakdowns private so that my family doesn't have to suffer the consequences of Nassar's actions. But I remember one breakdown in particular.
Would you like a chair, ma'am?
No, sorry, I can't see because the chair's real quick.
You've got Kleenex right there. Take as long as you need.
That would be helpful. Do you know where it is? Okay. I had a complete moment of clarity and understanding of who Nassar really is and what he's done, and I ran into my parents' room sobbing out of control. I remember grabbing my head and banging it on the bed, trying to get the thoughts out. I also remember vaguely hearing my parents in the background trying to calm me down. It took a while, but I managed to calm down with their help and sleeping in their bed for the rest of the night. That's something a 25-year-old shouldn't have to do, sleep in their parents' bed because they're afraid of the monster. But it's happened more than once now, and to be honest, I'm not sure when it will stop. Another thing that's affected me is how I view doctors. I'm very picky about what doctor I see, and that's because I was born with an autoinflammatory disease. Larry Nassar used to be one of my favorite doctors. It always seemed like he was trying to help my disease, but make it better, and I was so grateful for that. Now I know this was a part of his manipulation. I'll never know if he truly cared about my disease and my health, or if it was all just a facade in order to get me to see him again. Now when I see doctors, I can't help but second guess their intentions, and I'm never alone with them. I need someone there with me in order to feel comfortable and safe. This is also something a 25-year-old shouldn't have to do. Right now, because of all of this, I don't trust males at all. Apart from my immediate family and only a few select friends, I don't want to have any interaction with them. I don't like them being near me. I don't like having to talk to them, and the thought of ever being in a relationship right now makes me feel nauseated. This response might seem extreme, but I can't seem to help it right now. My anxiety skyrockets whenever I have to interact with a guy. My anxiety seems to have worsened in general. Things that shouldn't make me anxious in life now cause me worry. At times there doesn't have to be anything going wrong for me to all of a sudden feel this heavy weight on my chest, and like I can't breathe. These types of attacks happen more often than I wish they did. And when I'm in that moment, it seems as if it will never stop. The hardest part about this whole thing is that I'll never know why. Why Larry Nassar did this. Why he chose to prey on children, and what his fascination with gymnastics is. I'll never know if he even cared about the health of his patients or if being a doctor was just a way to get easier access to victims. Has he always been like this, or did he become like this over time? As someone who has their degree in psychology, I will never understand why all of this happened. It's one thing to be an outside observer to something such as this than it is to have it directly happen to you. The fact that I'll never have answers to so many questions is something I struggle with daily. I know that accepting this fact is something that I'll have to come to terms with, but right now I'm still confused, angry, and hurt. I think a part of me will always be this way, and the feeling will just get less and less over time. I know I'll never be the same person that I was before I found out the truth. So much about me and the way I view life has changed, some of it good and some bad. I also know that my brain is still continuing to absorb and process all the information, and that's okay. One day, I will have complete clarity of the person Larry Nassar is, and I'll be able to handle it. I know my breakdowns and anxiety attacks are temporary. I know that even though sometimes I just want to give in and hide away from everyone, I'm stronger than what happened to me. I refuse to let a monster control the rest of my life. So even if my voice has been shaking this entire time, or I've started to cry, it doesn't matter. I'm here, standing on my own 2 feet in front of my assaulter, and I hope he and everyone else in this room knows who will win this battle in the end. Thank you.
You and your sister survivors have won it. Rachel started it. You are all winning. All of us judges have heard you. I hear you in regard to sentencing. You can't make sense of crime. Your why will not be answered.
I know.
I think that's okay with you. You are in control. You proved that here today. You need to leave your anxiety here and live your life. There's nothing confusing about what you said. You said in what you read that you're confused. You're not confused. You have clarity. You got that because you were writing that, I think. And as you stand here publicly and acknowledge that you are strong, that you are able to face him, tell him what he did, you are helping heal not just yourself, but countless others, and making others strong with your words. That counts for so much. I've heard you. I will do the right thing. I hope. Maybe not everybody will agree with it. That's my decision to make. But you and your sister survivors have been and will be part of all of that. Stand tall, keep talking. You are in control.
Thank you. Thank you.
We need to take 15 minutes. That's all for this record. We'll return in 15. All right.
Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Stacey Delicat. You've been watching live testimony in the sentencing case against Larry Nassar. That is the former MSU doctor who has pled guilty were patients of his. Today is the 4th day of testimony, and today the judge said now a total of 120 victims will be sharing their story as this sentencing hearing continues. Joining me here on set right now, Ron Blitzer, senior editor of Law and Crime and a former prosecutor. Certainly some more powerful moments this morning, and it all got started off with Jordan Weber, the former Olympic gymnast, who came forward and told her story. What were your impressions?
One thing that really stuck out to me was how many of these women who previously didn't want their identities known now have decided to go public with their identities.
Absolutely. There were several minors we heard from, a 15-year-old, people up there with their parents. And yeah, after Jordan Weber, it was like almost every young woman we heard from this morning, the judge or the prosecutor rather had said this was someone who just decided today they were going to come forward rather than have someone else read a statement or not show their face, who are willing to be identified to stand with what they call their fellow sisters, their fellow survivors in all of this. Again, the Olympic gymnast Jordan Weber starting this out, and we know Ali Raisman is in the courtroom and is going to be testifying at some point later today. But we heard from all sorts of survivors today, everything from other gymnasts at MSU to people who were swimmers and somehow had pain, had injuries from the athletics and were directed to Nassar. It was interesting how they all said, wow, they felt so lucky to be a patient of his. They were starstruck when they got to his office because of the photos all over the walls, the autographs of famous gymnasts and athletes, how he was basically looked upon as the best of the best. Also another interesting point, we did hear from at least one father of 2 victims. 2 of his daughters were actually abused by Nassar, Brad Johnson, who's a doctor himself. But what I found interesting was how many of these young girls said their parents were sometimes in the room with them. But everyone was just sort of under this guise, well, we've heard this guy's the best of the best and he must know what he's doing.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking for the parents in particular to know that they were in the room when these acts were going on in many cases. But Nassar was known to position his patients, his victims, and himself in a way that the parents couldn't see what he was doing. So he would be there abusing these girls, and the mothers would be in the room with them, and the parents would have no idea that anything wrong was happening. And with a parent there and the girl being with this renowned doctor, they don't understand what's happening at the time. And maybe they were uncomfortable but were too afraid to say anything, or in some cases actually thought that they were undergoing a legitimate procedure and only found out years later that no, they were actually abused.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, shifting gears to one other point, and that is that so many of these women are expressing their anger, their frustration, their outrage, of course, not just at Nassar, but at all of his enablers, whether that's USA Gymnastics or MSU. And we are following some developments this morning. I mentioned at the top of the broadcast that last night the MSU student government had a meeting. They voted unanimously of a lack of confidence in the university's president, Luana Simon. Now we have learned that the MSU board is meeting this morning to discuss MSU's, the president Simon's future at MSU. Meantime, the board has also issued calls for the Attorney General to investigate whether there was any wrongful behavior from officials at MSU. So those are 2 big developments here at this time. Additionally, after the board called for the AG to investigate officials at MSU, board president Simon did release a statement saying it is clear to the board and me that a review by the Attorney General's office can provide the answers people need. As I told the Attorney General in December, MSU will fully cooperate with any inquiry by law enforcement authorities. I hope this review will help the survivors and the entire MSU community heal and move forward. Of course, Simon under a lot of fire, not just the student government voting last night that they have no confidence in her. There have been a number of editorials in Detroit, people upset that she hasn't been in court every day, that she did show up one day in the beginning of statements, but beyond that she hasn't been there to listen to the testimony. What do you think this all means for her?
It's really hard to say right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the board took action against her now, just sort of as a PR move, because they're under a lot of fire and they may want to show, oh, we're doing something, someone's going to take a fall. At the same time, it might be wiser to let an investigation go forward and see what that turns up. because if Simon really didn't do anything wrong, if she's not the one who should take the fall, then maybe they'll wait to see who's really responsible here. What happened that let this go forward? Was it Simon's fault? Was it someone else? I think that an Attorney General's investigation is the right way to go. The school should absolutely cooperate with anything and see which people were complicit, who was enabling Nassar to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly it wouldn't be just Luana Simon, because we know there are reports that people came forward as far back as 1997 at MSU to report abuse from Nassar. So certainly I would think there's a long list of officials, and in fact the Detroit Free Press came out with a whole article yesterday. Who knew and what should they have done at MSU, with a lot of names from people high up at the university. So it will be interesting to see what happens and what comes out of the board's meeting today on Simon's future. Meantime, going back to some of the testimony we've heard this morning, Jordan Weber starting it off today, she said that like many of the people that we heard from, that he was an absolute monster, and she said, it's really time for change. It's really time for USA Gymnastics, for MSU to be held accountable. She said USA Gymnastics sent a doctor to them when they were in London competing in the Olympics who was an abuser, who was a child molester. She started to tear up then and got emotional. And she really talks about how hard this has been for all of the women as this has come out, as the proceedings against Nassar have developed in recent years. So let's go ahead and listen to some of her testimony from earlier this morning.
I first of all want to thank you for allowing us to speak here. I thought that training for the Olympics would be the hardest thing that I would ever have to do, but in fact, the hardest thing I've ever had to do is process that I'm a victim of Larry Nassar. It has caused me to feel shame and confusion, and I've spent months trying to think back on my experience and wonder how I didn't even know this was happening to me, and how I became so brainwashed by Larry and everyone at USA Gymnastics, both whom I thought were supposed to be on my side. I started seeing Larry Nassar at the age of 8 right here in my hometown of Lansing. He was known as the best gymnastics doctor in the world. Everyone at my club, on the U.S. national team, and across the country saw Larry, and everyone said the same thing. He was a miracle worker, and he could fix just about anything. I was treated by Larry for any and all of my injuries from ages 8 till I was 18. And it wasn't long before he had gained my trust. He became a safe person of sorts. And to my teenage self, he appeared to be the good guy in an environment that was intense and restricting. He would try to advise me on how to deal with the stresses of training or my coaches. He would bring us food and coffee at the Olympics when we were too afraid to eat too much in front of our coaches. I didn't know that these were all grooming techniques that he used to manipulate me and brainwash me into trusting him. And when I was 14 years old, I tore my hamstring in my right leg. This was when he started performing the procedure that we are all now familiar with. I would cringe at how uncomfortable it felt. He did it time after time, appointment after appointment, convincing me that it was helping my hamstring injury. And the worst part was I had no idea that he was sexually abusing me for his own benefit. I knew it felt strange, but he was the national team doctor. Who was I to question his treatments, or even more, risk my chance at making the Olympic team or being chosen to compete internationally? And after all, he was recommended by the national team staff, and he treated us monthly at all of our national team camps. I had even talked to my teammates, Allie Raisman and Michaela Maroney, about this treatment and how uncomfortable it made us feel. None of us really understood it. After I made the Olympic team, I suffered a stress fracture in my right shin. It was extremely painful to tumble and land using my legs, but I fought through the pain because it was the Olympics, and I knew it would be probably my only shot.
Can you slow down just a little?
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate that. Just a little.
Our bodies were all hanging by a thread when we were in London. Who was the doctor that USAG sent to keep us healthy and help us get through? The doctor that was our abuser. The doctor that is a child molester. Because of my shin, I couldn't train without being in extreme pain, and it affected the number of routines I could do to prepare before the competition. And ultimately, it made me feel less prepared than I should have been. I didn't qualify to the all-around competition, and I went through a dark time right before we won the team gold. Now I question everything about that injury and the medical treatment I received. Was Larry even doing anything to help my pain? Was I getting the proper medical care? Or was he only focused on which one of us he was going to prey on next? What was he think about when he massaged my sore muscles every day? Now I question everything. To this day, I still don't know how he could have been allowed to do this for so long. My teammates and I were subjected to his medical care every single month at the National Team Training Center in Texas. He was the only male allowed to be present in the athlete dorm rooms to do whatever treatments he wanted. He was allowed to treat us in hotel rooms alone without any supervision. He took photos of us during training and whenever else he wanted. Nobody was protecting us from being taken advantage of. Nobody was even concerned whether or not we were being sexually abused. I was not protected, and neither were my teammates. My parents trusted USA Gymnastics and Larry Nassar to take care of me, and we were betrayed by both. And now, the lack of accountability from USAG, USOC, and Michigan State have caused me and many other girls to remain shameful, confused, and disappointed. I'm angry with myself for not recognizing the abuse, and that's something I'm struggling with today. But even though I'm a victim, I do not and will not live my life as one. I'm an Olympian. Despite being abused, I worked so hard and managed to achieve my goal. But I want everyone, especially the media, to know that despite my athletic achievements, I am one of over 140 women and survivors whose story is important. Our pain is all the same, and our stories are all important. And now, the people who are responsible need to accept responsibility for the pain they have caused me and the rest of the women who have been abused. Larry Nassar is accountable. USA Gymnastics is accountable. The U.S. Olympic Committee is accountable. My teammates and friends have been through enough, and now it's time for change because the current and future gymnasts do not deserve to live in anxiety, fear, or be unprotected like I was. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words. You have an Olympian voice. People will listen to you. I've listened to you. You are really very strong, not just as an athlete, but as a woman, as a survivor. I know you'll get past this because of that strength, because you had the strength to come here and talk. It's really important because what you're doing is helping to set a new precedent that all victim survivors should speak out and that all victims have a right to speak out. And your young self did not know that, but you have already, with what you've done in our community and so many others and in the world, molded so many young minds and people. What you've just done now is equally important, maybe more important, because they will listen to you. They will speak out like you. They want to be you. You have nothing to be ashamed about. I'm so honored that you came to tell your story here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was just testimony from Jordan Weber, a gold medal gymnast who was part of the Fierce Five back at the 2012 Summer Olympics, testifying of the abuse that she suffered at the hands of Team USA Gymnastics former Dr. Larry Nassar. If you're just joining us now, we have been listening to survivor impact statements all morning on what is the 4th day of the sentencing hearing against Nassar. So far, we have heard from more than 70 victims, and the judge saying today the total number of people who will speak is now 120. It seems more and more women are feeling the strength and the courage to come forward and share their story. And so it's likely that this is going to stretch sometime into next week. The judge said very likely past Monday. Jordan Weber was treated by Nassar from the ages of 8 to 18, she says, and she says that Nassar used grooming techniques to brainwash me. I have Ron Blitzer with me, the senior editor of Law and Crime, and this is something we heard from so many of the girls, this word that they felt brainwashed. He would joke around with them, he would groom them, making, talking about family, telling jokes, calling them cutesy names, to make them feel like he was a good guy. But ultimately, they say this was brainwashing.
Yeah, and it really calls back. It makes me think of similar instances of abuse that you see with clergy members, whether it's priests or rabbis. Something similar happened in my own high school, where you have these figures who are very prominent in their roles and they're part of larger institutions, and they maybe have friends in high places who cover up for them, but they're also well known and well liked in a lot of cases, and they can be very charismatic sometimes. So when they're carrying out these horrible acts for so long, the victims don't know what to do, because these people are so cemented in their roles that they think that, oh, well, if this has been going on and no one's doing anything, what am I supposed to do?
What we also heard from Jordan Weber, and what we heard from so many of the other women, is that it feels like there was no one there to protect them. No one was there looking out for them. She said no one was protecting us from being taken advantage of. No one was concerned. He was the only male that was allowed to be in the athlete dorms. He was allowed to be in hotel rooms alone with him. It just seems like there are so many I don't know, maybe rules, anything goes, it seemed like, was the philosophy with him. If it was Nassar, well, yeah, then he had full unfettered access to these women.
Yeah, and, it just goes to, him being renowned in his field and no one wanting to shake up the system, because, they've heard complaints, they heard about complaints going back for years or decades, and they didn't do anything about it because they wanted to keep Nassar in place for one reason or another.
So, of course, Weber calling out USA Gymnastics as well, but we heard from many other women this morning calling out MSU, who were students at MSU, who were athletes there, who saw Nassar there when he was MSU's sports doctor, and we see Nassar being led back in the courtroom. And we've been talking this morning about the role of MSU, about what is going to happen with the university's president, the board right now meeting to discuss her future. And you and I just looked into her, and we saw Luana Simon has been president of the university since 2004, but her time there goes back to the 90s. She was vice president back in the early 90s.
Yeah, from 93.
So she was there when these first complaints were first brought in 1997. And I mentioned a report before. I attributed it to the Detroit Free Press, but I want to correct myself. It's actually the Detroit News that was out with a report. What MSU knew, 14 were warned of Nassar abuse, the paper says, in their investigation. So a lot of people who were allegedly told about this over the years. And, it'll be interesting to me, and now especially that the board is asking for an investigation by the Attorney General's office, whether down the road we're going to see any charges brought against MSU officials who knew something and just didn't speak up.
Yeah, as you were just saying, Simons has been with the university throughout this whole time. We don't know what role she did or didn't play, what she knew, what she didn't know, but I'm sure there are other officials who have been there for a long time who may have known what was going on, may have taken steps to cover this up. Maybe they didn't. Maybe the university didn't have much of a role, but I'm really hoping that an investigation gets to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and we should add she also presently serves as chairwoman of the executive committee of the NCAA, so she has some involvement in athletics, clearly. Yeah. We are looking at a live picture in the courtroom, and before we did see that Aly Raisman, Olympic gold medalist, is back in the courtroom with Jordan Weber. Aly Raisman expected to testify later this morning. By my count, there are still several dozen women that we haven't heard from, and what we also talked talked about was how yesterday the judge read a letter from Nassar saying it was making him uncomfortable to hear these statements. She, of course, then called him delusional and said this is the least you can do for all of the abuse that these women have suffered. But what do you think, you know, having been a former prosecutor yourself, we know obviously these women are feeling empowered to come forward. What sort of empowerment does it give them to be able to face Nassar? You know, because he had said, oh, I don't want to be there for this. Obviously he has to be. She put him in the box next to him, the judge says, so the women could look directly at him and wouldn't have to keep turning back to see him. What sort of empowerment does it give these women to be able to look him straight in the face and said, you did this to me, you're a monster?
Well, a lot of times in criminal cases, especially where there's so many victims, the victims themselves kind of are lost in the shuffle because, again, you know, when you're dealing with criminal cases, it's not the victim bringing the case, it's the prosecutor, it's the state. So, you know, they're just key witnesses. But here, you know, especially when there's so many of them, if this did go to trial, I mean, I'm sure they would all be able to get a chance to testify, or at least some of them would. But we really get to hear their story. And this isn't just a matter of him being sent to prison for the rest of his life, because we know that's going to happen. But him just going to prison, it protects potential future victims, but it doesn't change a whole lot for the individuals who have already been affected. So them getting the opportunity to go to court, look him in the eye, and say what's on their mind could really help them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And talking about some of the mental anguish we've heard these women discuss, everything from anxiety and depression to feeling suicidal. We know there are parents who have stood up there in the past days whose children took their lives because of anxiety, depression, and other anguish they had over this abuse. You know, one girl said, you know, I thought I was crazy, but then I saw these other girls came forward and I said, I'm not crazy. You know, this is what it is to be a victim of abuse. Among the people we heard from this morning, 2 sisters, you know, interesting again, and the anguish of the parents to have known that they subjected their young daughters to this, thinking that they were sending their daughters to the very best when it comes to, you know, sports medicine. This guy is thought of as the best. And many times the parents in the room during these exams, and so the guilt that they're feeling as well. And we have Allie Raisman's picture up now on the live feed, so this says to me she is probably going to be next reading her statement as soon as the judge comes back in the room, so we're standing by for that. But certainly a lot of eyes will be on her. She was one of the most vocal people to speak up earliest late last year when she came forward on 60 Minutes and disclosed that she and her teammates had all been the victims of this abuse. And this morning, Jordan Weber in her testimony talked about how she and Allie and the other gymnasts would actually talk about this. Is it weird that this is how he's treating us, that this is treatment? They talked about how uncomfortable it made them feel. None of them really understood it, but they just went along with it. And sadly, that is how abuse works in many ways. The abuser grooms the victims, makes them feel like nothing wrong is happening. Let's go back to MSU for a moment.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3.
We already
Let me
know that
if you can.
MSU has been named in several lawsuits filed, I think, by a group of 140 victims, right? So in those cases, what stands to happen? Can we expect, you know, the victims to eventually collect damages for emotional distress or something like that from the university in a case like that?
I would certainly expect that. You have so many victims who are coming forward, who are suing the university, and you know they'll be bringing their case to show the university knew what was going on. They should have put a stop to this. They didn't. They were, you know, negligent at best in letting this continue. And you know, if they can present their case, they'll probably collect a pretty sizable verdict, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the university did announce already that they've set up a $10 million fund for victims of Nassar to access that money for mental health services and so forth. You know, that's something, that's one step. I don't think it's enough for many of these women. Let's go back inside to the courtroom, though, and listen. I think Allie Raisman is going to be up next reading her victim impact statement.
Judges, you've noted the number has changed during the course of the week. And the next survivor you will hear from is one of those women who had reached out and requested to come and speak today. I am so happy she did. She has previously been publicly identified. However, I will let you know, as I've indicated, she is on the screen. Allie Raisman will be the next survivor you hear from.
Good morning. Thank
Good
you
morning.
for being here.
Thank you.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Okay. ALEXANDRARAISMAN.
Thank you. What would you like to hear?
Your Honor, thank you for the opportunity to make this statement here today, and thank you for providing the time and flexibility for all the other brave survivors to make their statement. Each survivor deserves to be heard equally. I didn't think I would be here today. I was scared and nervous. It wasn't until I started watching the impact statements from the other brave survivors that I realized I too needed to be here. Larry, you do realize now that we, this group of women you so heartlessly abused over such a long period of time, are now a force, and you are nothing. The tables have turned, Larry. We are here, we have our voices, and we are not going anywhere. And now, Larry, it's your turn to listen to me. There is no map that shows you the pathway to healing. Realizing that you are a survivor of sexual abuse is really hard to put into words. I cannot adequately capture the level of disgust I feel when I think about how this happened. Larry, you abused the power and trust I and so many others placed in you, and I am not sure I will ever come to terms with how horribly you manipulated and violated me. You were the USA Gymnastics national team doctor, the Michigan and the United States Olympic team doctor. You were trusted by so many and took advantage of countless athletes and their families. The effects of your actions are far-reaching. Abuse goes way beyond the moment, often haunting survivors for the rest of their lives, making it difficult to trust and impacting their relationships. It is all the more devastating when such abuse comes at the hand of such a highly regarded doctor, since it leaves survivors questioning the organizations and even the medical profession itself upon which so many rely. I am here to face you, Larry, so you can see I've regained my strength, that I'm no longer a victim, I'm a survivor. I am no longer that little girl you met in Australia where you first began grooming and manipulating. As for your letter yesterday, you are pathetic to think that anyone would have any sympathy for you. You think this is hard for you? Imagine how all of us feel. Imagine how it feels to be an innocent teenager in a foreign country, hearing a knock on the door, and it's you. I don't want you to be there, but I don't have a choice. Treatments with you were mandatory. You took advantage of that. You even told on us if we didn't want to be treated by you, knowing full well the troubles that would cause for us. Lying on my stomach with you on my bed, insisting that your inappropriate touch would help to heal my pain. The reality is you caused me a great deal of physical, mental, and emotional pain. You never healed me. You took advantage of our passions and our dreams. You made me uncomfortable, and I thought you were weird. But I felt guilty because you were a doctor, so I assumed I was the problem for thinking badly of you. I wouldn't allow myself to believe that the problem is you. From the time we were little, we are taught to trust doctors. You are so sick, I can't even comprehend how angry I feel when I think of you. You lied to me and manipulated me to think that when you treated me, you were closing your eyes because you had been working hard when you were really touching me, an innocent child, to pleasure yourself. Imagine feeling like you have no power and no voice. Well, you know what, Larry? I have both power and voice, and I am only beginning to just use them. All these brave women have power, and we will use our voices to make sure you get what you deserve. A life of suffering spent replaying the words delivered by this powerful army of survivors. I am also here to tell you to your face, Larry, that you have not taken gymnastics away from me. I love this sport, and that love is stronger than the evil that resides in you and those who enabled you to hurt many people. You already know you're going away to a place where you won't be able to hurt anybody ever again. But I am here to tell you that I will not rest until every last trace of your influence on this sport has been destroyed like the cancer it is. Your abuse started 30 years ago, but that's just the first reported incident we know of. If over these many years just one adult listened and had the courage and character to act, this tragedy could have been avoided. I and so many others would have never, ever met you. Larry, you should have been locked up a long, long time ago. Fact is, we have no idea how many people you victimized or what was done or not done that allowed you to keep doing it and to get away with it for so long. Over those 30 years, when survivors came forward, adult after adult, many in positions of authority protected you, telling each survivor it was okay, that you weren't abusing them. In fact, many adults had you convince the survivors that they were being dramatic or had been mistaken. This is like being violated all over again. How do you sleep at night? You were decorated by USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic Committee, both of which put you on advisory boards and committees to come up with policies that would protect athletes from this kind of abuse. You are the person they had, quote, take the lead of athlete care. You are the person they say, quote, provided the foundation for our medical system. I cringe to think that your influence remains in the policies that are supposed to keep athletes safe, that these organizations have for years claimed, quote, state of the art. To believe in the future of gymnastics is to believe in change. But how are we to believe in change when these organizations aren't even willing to acknowledge the problem? It's easy to put out statements talking about how athlete care is the highest priority, but they've been saying that for years, and all the while this nightmare was happening. False assurances from organizations are dangerous, especially when people want so badly to believe them. They make it easier to look away from the problem and enable bad things to continue to happen. And even now, after all that has happened, USA Gymnastics has the nerve to say the very same things it has said all along. Can't you see how disrespectful that is? Can't you see how much that hurts? A few days ago, USA Gymnastics put out a statement attributed to its president and CEO, Carrie Perry, saying she came to listen to the courageous women and said, quote, their powerful voices leave an indelible imprint on me and will impact my decision as president and CEO every day. This sounds great, Miss Perry, but at this point, talk is cheap. You left midway through the day and no one has heard from you or the board. Carrie, I have never met you, and I know you weren't around for most of this, but you accepted the position of President and CEO of USA Gymnastics, and I assume by now you are very well aware of the weighty responsibility you've taken on. Unfortunately, you've taken on an organization that I feel is rotting from the inside, and while this may not be what you thought you were getting into, you will be judged by how you deal with it. A word of advice. Continuing to issue statements of empty promises, thinking that will pacify us, will no longer work. Yesterday, USA Gymnastics announced that it was terminating